Um, Welcome to this meeting of Oxford City Council on the 25th of November 2024. The meeting is being recorded in the interests of public accountability. Please do make sure that your electronic devices don't make any silly noises during the meeting. I can't actually fine you if they do, but I would like to be able to. Please note, members can leave and rejoin the meeting at any time if they wish, but please inform the clerk if you're going to leave permanently. Just a word on the agenda. I'm going to move item 11, appointment of the honorary recorder, up to the end of the announcements because the outgoing honorary recorder will speak briefly at that point. We have a full agenda. We have a petition to hear and lots of questions. Members, please be aware that depending on how long we spend on those, this may cut into the time we have to hear motions. However, obviously, questioning the administration and hearing from the public are essential functions of the council. So I will leave that with you. Good. Apologies for absence. Jonathan, do we have any?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Ooh, that's different. We have apologies from Councillors Hollingsworth, Hunt, Jupp and Coyne, and I note that Councillors Harley, Turner and Latif will be late.
Thank you. Any more apologies from the room? Councillor Smoughton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I've had late notice that Councillor Altaf Khan is ill and isn't going to be able to make it. Councillor Rod Smith will be with us shortly, but will be briefly delayed.
Well, I wish Councillor Altaf Khan well. Did you have? No. No more? Councillor Jarvis. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Gant.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. After discussions with the monitoring officer, I'd like to declare an interest in respect of my role in the County Council in respect of item 16 and items 19A, 19B, 19C, 19D, 19E and 19F.
Thank you, Councillor Gant, and I'm pleased to see a member. Sorry.
Susan Brown.
I'm pleased to see a councillor who has so much interest in the agenda. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I haven't got quite such extensive interests as Councillor Gant, it appears, but I would like to declare an interest in item C, the motion on notice about promoting free shuttle buses. I have taken advice from the monitoring officer who assures me I do not have a pecuniary interest, as although I am an employee of Oxford University Hospitals, I am not a decision maker in any shape or form when it comes to transport issues, and the potential beneficiary does not constitute a pecuniary interest. Nonetheless, should we reach that item on the agenda, I will withdraw from the chamber and not take part in the vote because I feel that it would be a better way of approaching it.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Emma, as legal officer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Gant, just to clarify, I understand that you will be leaving the room for those items and not taking part.
Yes, I apologise for omitting that. That's correct, yes.
Thank you, Councillor Gant. Are there any further declarations of interest? Seeing none, minutes. Councillor Clarkson.
I don't know whether I should declare this or not, but there's a question from Councillor Raymond relating to Foxwell Drive and Ruskin College land. That's very close to where I live. I know it's just a question, but I just thought I should raise it in case.
Emma, do you have a view?
I don't believe that's a problem, though. It's a matter for yourself. That there's no decision in relation to Foxwell Drive at this meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further declarations of interest? Seeing none, we are asked to agree the meeting of the ordinary meeting of Council held on the 7th of October. Does anybody have any corrections to make to the minutes? Seeing none, can we please approve the minutes as a correct record? All those in favour? Aye. I think that's everybody. Yep. Good. Committees, I am informed that there are none. Announcements, I will be brief and say two things only. First of all, that it was, of course, an honour to introduce the Remembrance Day service as the Lord Mayor does every year, and also to welcome the representatives of the majority of our twin cities. The best thing we can do, as I said at the time, to remember those who have given their lives is to safeguard and spread the peace that they won. And in that context, I wish heartily that we will be able to welcome a representative of Ramallah sooner rather than later. The second brief announcement is that there is an open evening at as we speak at the museum downstairs, so any member who wishes to go there in their tea break will be most welcome. Sheriff, do you have any announcements?
No, I don't, Lord Mayor.
Leader?
No, nothing from me, Lord Mayor.
Chief Exec? No. Monitoring Officer, Finance Officer? No. Good. We have... Yes. My apologies. City Rector.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Good evening, everybody. I couldn't help but hum to myself, love is just like a merry-go-round, all the fun of the fair. Any of us remember Puppet on a String? Yes, generation thing. Did win the Eurovision Song Contest 1967. I think Broad Street looks fantastic. And well done, if I may say, and thank you to everybody who's organised that. But this morning I was with a young person who is not in a great place. And we talked through the normal things of how we handle that. And I said, have you ever thought of the old thing of saying thank you for 3 things at the end of each day? Just little things. And she said, I already do my gratitude list. Now, this is Thanksgiving week for many across the world, and this young lady from America, she knew what it was to have a gratitude list that she texted to a friend in Durham each day. Many people are thankful for our city council, and many people are thankful for our city. And so in this Thanksgiving week, may I just suggest, if I may, that we do also in some way have a gratitude list, and just remember what it is we can be thankful for one another and for our great city. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, City Rector. We now move, as I said, to move item 11 up the agenda, and I would like to invite Judge Ian Pringle, who has served as our honorary recorder for the last 10 years, to say a few words briefly. Your Honour.
Lord Mayor, officers of Oxford City Council and councillors, about 10 years and a month ago, you were foolish enough to vote me in to be your honorary recorder. Foolish because you hadn't worked out that actually I went to the other place. However, conversion has taken place. And I was seen cheering for Oxford University when they scored a try against Cambridge at Twickenham. It's been an honour and privilege to be your recorder over this period of time. The thing I will always remember is Remembrance Sunday and joining with so many others in that occasion. I'm tempted to say as a lawyer, I'm going to produce Exhibit 1, but Judge Maria Lamb took over the post as resident judge in Oxford a month or so ago. She's absolutely cracking. You're going to love her. And I hope that you will take great pleasure in voting her in as my successor. The first female resident judge Oxford has ever had, and the first female honorary recorder you've ever had. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Judge Pringle, for your decades of service to our city, and welcome, Judge Lamb. Susan, are you here to formally move the appointment?
I'm delighted to formally move the report appointing the honorary recorder, particularly delighted to be appointing our first female honorary recorder and resident judge. So I propose that and recommend it to council. Thank you.
Councillor Jarvis to second.
Apologies, getting used to the no microphones. Formally seconded and share the words of Councillor Brown.
And I believe, unless there is anything else, we can take a vote on this straight away. All those in favour? That is, I'm informed, unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Good. That concludes item 5. Item 6, there are no public addresses relating to matters for decision at this meeting. So we have item 7, the Local Authority Housing Fund Round 3, which I believe is Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm asking Council to agree this report and make available the required budget provision and agree the necessary project approval and delegations to enable us to proceed with entering into the Local Authority Housing Fund Round 3. The fund will provide this council with up to £849,000 of government funding, which we will match with up to £1,061,000 from our housing revenue account in order to purchase at least 5 new properties, which will be wholly owned by the City Council. 3 of these properties will initially be let at an affordable rent to families who have arrived in the UK under the government's Afghan Citizens Resettlement Scheme. Whenever these initial tenancies come to an end, the properties will form part of our general housing stock and will be available for this council to allocate to any local families, households in housing need. The remaining 2 properties will be used as temporary accommodation for homeless households who we have a duty to accommodate. And we're currently experiencing unprecedented demand for temporary accommodation in this city, and these 2 extra units will help relieve some of that pressure. So I'm recommending this report to Council because this funding opportunity represents a good deal for the HRA, a good opportunity to grow our property portfolio to meet future housing needs. It's also consistent with the desire of this Council to support refugee resettlement where we can. It builds on our previous work to directly support 57 refugee families who are now calling Oxford home. And it's also in line with our commitment to becoming a Council of Sanctuary, an official accreditation which I hope we will be able to lay claim to very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Upton, do you wish to speak now? Are there any councillors wishing to make points on this item? Councillor Malik.
Thank you very much. It's too late, but it's still welcome because it's taken a very long time for the Afghan refugee to be houses instead of the other refugees have taken place above them. So I welcome this report. Thank you very much.
Any other councillors wishing to speak? Seeing none, we will take a vote on the proposal. We recommended to approve the allocation of capital budget from the housing revenue account, which is a mixture of HRA borrowing and grant, as the papers state. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you. Item 8 is for noting decisions taken under Part 17.9 of the Constitution. The report of the Head of Law and Governance, Councillor Brown.
I move the report.
Does any councillor wish to make any point? Councillor Henwood and... Yes. First of all, Councillor Henwood.
Sorry, I was going to move to second that.
Thank you. We don't need a seconder, but your support is noted. Councillor Fairweather.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Could I ask Councillor Brown, I understand that this decision had to be made as soon as possible, but the date for renewing the contract must have been known about since the start of the original contract. Can the council be given an explanation about why this needed an urgent decision?
Councillor Fairweather, I think that's a fair enough question, and it's something that we're looking at to try and make sure that some of these decisions are being taken in a rather more timely manner.
Thank you.
Are there any further comments or questions on this report? Seeing none, we are asked simply to note the report, so we don't need to take a vote. Item 9 is extension of term for appointments of independent persons, which is to be moved by the chair of the Standards Committee. Councillor Diggins.
I move the report.
Thank you. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Smith, thank you very much. Are there any further comments or questions on the report? Seeing none, we are asked to authorise the monitoring officer to extend the terms of office of the council's independent persons for a further 4 months. Can I see all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Unanimity strikes. We move on to item 10, which is also an item for noting, similar to item 8. It is urgent key decisions taken since July 2023. Councillor Brown.
I move the report.
Do any councillors wish to make points or ask questions on this report? Seeing nobody, we are simply asked to note the report, so this is noted, I take it. Item 11 we have dealt with. Item 12, therefore, is constitutional updates, report of the Head of Law and Governance. I believe Councillor Brown to propose.
Yes, if anyone's got any technical questions, then I would very much recommend that they get put to Emma rather than me, but I would like to move this update report to the Constitution. It's bringing our Constitution in line with current legislation and also trying to sort of iron out some of the oddities in relation to different delegations in relation to financial matters. So I think it's a fairly straightforward report. You will have seen in your briefing note that you've got an updated report making some sort of small corrections to the original report in terms of things like numbering, and our grateful thanks to Councillor Smoten for drawing attention to some of those. So thank you very much for that, but other than that, I move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Henwood, thank you. Does any member wish to make any comments or ask questions on the report? Councillor Smoten.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to flag, for the sake of the minutes, just a certain amount of concern that this is getting changed right at the last minute, because obviously it does have, I don't know if legal force is quite the right thing to say, at least pseudo-legal force. So there's a certain amount of concern there. And I can see from a brief leaf through the new document that there are still problems that need to be resolved. So just to flag that there is a need to use the delegated power here to fix that. Because it will begin to regulate our procurement processes. So I shall vote to approve what's in front of us because of that delegation to make further changes.
Thank you, Councillor Smote, and Emma, I believe you're able to confirm that that is within the delegated powers given in the report.
Yes, Lord Mayor, so I can confirm that I've got a delegation within the Constitution to make any amendments in terms of typographical or sort of operational changes to it, and also there is a delegation within the report to make any consequential amendments. Obviously, were they of any significance, then they would not be made and they'd be brought back to Council. We do intend to bring another constitutional review early in 2025.
Thank you, Emma. Does any member have anything further to say on this report? Seeing none, can we take a vote on agreeing to amend the Constitution in line with the report to reflect changes to the contract rules with any minor consequential amendments that need to be made by delegated powers? All those in favour? I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Good. We therefore move on to item 13, which is questions on Cabinet minutes. There's a time limit of 15 minutes for this item. We begin with the minutes of the Cabinet meeting of the 16th of October. Does any member have any questions? Other.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm referring to the 16th of October meeting on the topic of IT procurement for a new planning system. This is clearly an important system for administering the planning process in the Council. Can the leader or Cabinet member tell the Council what steps have been undertaken to ensure a proper evaluation, procurement and implementation processes in place for this project? Have all the weaknesses identified in the Learning Lessons report into the QL fiasco been incorporated into the process for this proposed new system?
Who is answering this? Councillor Brown, I see you moving. Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, I mean, Councillor Upton was the proposer of this at Cabinet because I was in hospital at the time, but it was very much a joint proposal. It was a joint proposal from us both. You ask about the lessons learned, and that's a very fair point, Councillor Fairweather. I think the word fiasco is a bit of an exaggeration, given this is now a working system, which is doing an awful lot of very good things, so I'll just pass on that. But having said that, we have learned the lessons. I mean, there's been a lot of strengthening of both project management, the procurement process, and making sure the right departments in the Council are involved in implementation, making sure that IT in particular is even more heavily involved than in the last time. So I'm confident, and in fact, I can give you assurance because we've put together and put in place a number of very complicated IT systems since QL, and none of the issues that arose in QL have arisen in context of these. So I think our record is now starting to speak louder than my words, and therefore I think that should give you some assurance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Any further questions on the 16th of October minutes? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you. Just with respect to the land at Foxwell Drive, we had a scrutiny meeting, special meeting where this was discussed. Is that the correct? Are we referring to the? Is that the correct date? Yeah. But what came out of that was just the fact that there's perhaps an opportunity for Cabinet to occasionally, where appropriate, invite members of from the opposition who may be relevant for a particular decision like that to come to the Cabinet meeting. I just wonder whether that's something that could be explored in the future, so that perhaps would maybe resolve or any questions that might lead to call-ins, let's say, and in the process going forward. Am I referring to the correct date meeting? Yeah.
I believe so, and that sounds like a question for the leader.
It does. I mean, I'm always happy to have discussions with any member of this chamber on any issue. We do also have an opportunity through regular meetings with all the different group leaders to discuss items at that particular forum. There are also opportunities on the Cabinet agenda for people to address the Cabinet on any item that's on the agenda, or even items that are not on the agenda. So I do think there are plenty of opportunities there. I will, without fully understanding exactly what the issue is that Councillor Miles is trying to get to here, I'm happy to discuss that separately with her and see if there's anything else that we need to be doing.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Any further questions on the 16th of October? Seeing none, are there any questions on the Cabinet meeting held on the 13th of November? Councillor Smoten.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. It's Smoten, by the way. Rhymes with Snowden.
My apologies.
Worth saying now. Another 6 months in the term. 2 questions from me. One is corporate debt policy. So the paper on the corporate debt policy is not explicit about this, but it strongly suggests that one of the goals of the policy is to reduce debt arrears, including those arrears attributed to individual debtors. Can we first of all confirm if that is a goal? And if it is, then what category of individuals will be facing more vigorous debt collection as a result of the policy? And how do we propose to achieve increased collection without causing significant financial strain to the people involved? And second question relates to furnished tenancies. So it seems from the paper before Cabinet that the current situation is that if one does take advantage of that and rent furnishings, then you have 2 choices, one of which is to continue paying that additional. It's not rent. It is an additional service charge, which manifests itself like rent, to keep paying that indefinitely, or to amass a lump sum so that one is then able to buy one's own stuff and get out of that. Was any consideration given to some sort of hire purchase situation in order to enable tenants to eventually get out of that regime in a way which doesn't require them to have capital on hand in order to stop paying that additional service charge?
Councillor Smith.
And that's not the way this, as you say, that's not the way the scheme works at the moment. I'm sure it's something, different models could be explored with potential new providers as part of the procurement process. So, if you'd like to have a discussion with me about that, I can make sure that those options are explored with potential providers.
Thank you. Councillor Chapman was signalling part of the question might relate to his brief.
That's quite correct, Lord Mayor, yes. Clearly, we want to reduce individual debt to the council and also debt by businesses as well. That's definitely part of the aim. But what the paper makes clear is a distinction between those people who can pay and won't pay. And therefore, I think in those cases, we need to bring the full force of everything we can upon them in order to ensure they do. Sometimes that means going to court. Sometimes it means, many, many conversations. But we mustn't be seen to be easy about that, because it's part of our statutory responsibility as councillors and cabinet members to make sure that we do recover as much debt as possible. This is public money, and therefore we need to be really careful about that. I distinguish those people from those people who would like to pay but just can't pay. And that's quite a large group of people who are in debt to us, particularly in council house rent, council tax arrears and areas of that kind. And there, I think we need to work really closely with them to put in place debt repayment plans, maybe quite small amounts per week or per month, which enable them to reduce that debt over time. And to avoid, wherever we can, evicting people, let's say, from their council houses. Because all that will do will put them on the homelessness waiting list, and they'll come back in another guise seeking our support and services. So that's the distinction between those who can and won't, those who would like to but can't, and I think that's really at the heart of this particular policy, and we spent a lot of time in Cabinet discussing that.
Any further questions on the 13th of November minutes? Seeing none, that concludes questions on Cabinet minutes. We move on to item 14, questions on notice from members of Council. We begin with SB1 from Councillor Henwood. Do you have a supplementary?
I thank the leader for the response. I have no supplementary.
SB2, Councillor Henwood, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. The Inspectorate states in their report that net commuting into Oxford in 2011 was 29,000 and in 2021 was 18,900, both of which are considerably higher than the figure used in the HENA. I refer to page 10, items 7 and 58. The further introduction of bus gates, the ZES, ANPR cameras and the LTN scheme is likely to drive down commuting further and significantly impact the HENA. It is clear that without commuting, projected housing need cannot be met. Will the leader of the council now admit that connectivity and housing need are inherently linked, and how will the leader improve communication and commuter links to Oxford, taking into account the failure of the Oxford local plan? Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Brown.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I really struggled to hear what Councillor Henwood was actually saying there. I have to say, I think the microphones are not performing particularly well at this council. But if I understood him correctly, he was suggesting that there is a connection between housing provision and transport needs, which I think everyone in this chamber would completely accept. The point is that we have a drastic shortage of housing, particularly affordable housing, which is a point we were making in our local plan, and which, unfortunately, for reasons that I really don't fully understand, the planning inspector failed to accept, even though the government has fully accepted the fact that our housing need is much greater than that the planning inspector was recommending us to. And of course, as long as the housing need is not being met, then people will be travelling for ever increasing distances to our city. So yes, connectivity is incredibly important, but it is also true to say that in a city, you will always have people travelling to employment because they are centres of employment. So it is important that employment sites are near transport centres. So, for instance, around stations, bus connectivity, park and rides are all measures of bringing people in on public transport to participate in our local economy, which, as you all know, is thriving and is a very strong and fast-growing economy. So it's very, very important that we are planning the housing and the transport connectivity to go alongside it.
Question SB3, Councillor Yateman, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. If I could just have some clarity on how the council will be reaching out to individuals, and also whether those details can be shared with the ward councillors so that we can maybe speak to our constituents personally.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, my understanding is that we have been contacting everyone we can who we think might be able to benefit from Household Support Fund, and I'm sure that people would be happy to correspond with Councillor Yateman to point him to how he can point his constituents to further help.
SB4, Councillor Yateman, do you have a supplementary?
I do, yes. Could the council please give assurance that a change of this significance in terms of working hours would be a full council decision and not a cabinet decision?
Councillor Brown.
There are no current plans to move to a 4-day working week, but I'm sure if there were, it would be subject to a great deal of discussion with not just full council, but also with our staff.
Question SB5, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Thank you to the leader for her response. I agree entirely with everything she said. as many of us will know, postal services continue to be a real problem for residents across Oxford. So I simply want to ask, will she undertake to keep doing all that she can, accepting that some of it's not under our control, to ensure that the residents of Oxford receive the best possible postal service? Because what we have right now is not acceptable.
Yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Sorry, Lord Mayor. Yes, I'd like to thank Councillor Powell for his questions and his correspondence on this issue. Needless to say, I haven't yet received a response from the Royal Mail. I didn't post it, but I did receive an acknowledgement of my letter or of my email. I mean, I completely agree. It's absolutely unacceptable, the levels of postal service in Oxford. It's shocking. I'm aware of many people who've missed vital hospital appointments, who've found themselves in debt because they've found that important financial matters have not come to them in a timely way. So it is a really, really poor service. We know it's a national issue, but it does seem to be particularly acute in some parts of Oxford. And it is just some parts. I mean, other parts are actually still receiving a reasonable service. So it does suggest to me that there are things that Royal Mail could do about it, including sort of actually circulating some of the staff a bit more around the city. I know that Annalisa Dodds has done a huge amount of work to try and highlight this issue, and I'm really grateful to her for her work on that. But I think we are both frustrated at the lack of action so far. We will continue to pursue it.
Question SB6, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
And SB7, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
Question ET1, Councillor Miles, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I just want to understand how many times has the council actually had to claim on its insurance for flooded council-owned properties, that's either residential or commercial, in recent years? And do we have reserves set aside to cover the costs of any repairs and remediation before any insurance payout, if there is such flooding? Because I think it's noted in the written response that there is property insurance which may be possible to claim on in the event of flooding. Thank you.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, apologies, I was late, everyone. It won't surprise the councillor to know that I don't, off the top of my head, have a list of all insurance claims pursued by the council, whether to flooding or anything else, but I can probably ask wise people who do and share what we can. In terms of reserves, I mean, if we claim on our insurance, then the insurance would pay. I'm not sure I completely get the gist of the question, but if you'd like to clarify it over email, then I'm sure we can get whatever information about this would be useful.
Question ET2, Councillor Rahman, do you have a supplementary?
I do. Thank you. So it's very much the standard time, but I actually asked what the benefit was. But you've just said it's standard time and no benefit. Surely with a land that has planning permission is worth more than land without. So if a developer was to ask the council for access or agreement with planning permission, be in a stronger position, but I didn't see the benefits that I asked for benefits and you haven't stated any.
Councillor Turner.
Yeah, thanks to the council for clarifying it. So I think the benefit is that the council also has a degree of certainty going forward, and I suppose also someone might be inclined, simply to leave a project alone, which rather than understand the planning position in relation to a project and them doing that might not be to the benefit of the council's property. So those would be reasons. But as I say, we're talking about an option agreement. We're not talking about a decision. that will necessarily be exercised at this point. So we'll just have to see. And then lastly, I think on the sort of commercial side of things, it's quite important. I've always felt this, that councillors provide political guidance, but they're guided by expert officer advice. I'm not a sort of quantities surveyor, and nor am I a property lawyer. And so, you know, when there's a point of principle, then as an administration we should give political guidance, and that's what we do. That's what we've done here, which is to say that if there was a planning application approved, then we would be content to see the sale of the land in question, but the exact points about timing and the nature of the transaction, quite properly we are advised by our expert officers.
Question ET3, Councillor Rahman, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. So thanks for the response to the first one as well. At the time of when the application went through, all of the project was going to be funded by an external grant. When you said that you were looking to secure additional funding, is that for the whole project or partial project? What's the target?
Councillor Turner.
The whole project.
Question AR1, Councillor Henwood, do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Question AR2, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. So the towpath is the responsibility of the county council. The river is the responsibility of the city. I'm a little bit concerned why there's a two-tier policy towards boat owners in this.
Okay, so
Councillor Elton.
thank you. So there's sort of two bits to this. So the actual legal legislation is very much about buildings with chimneys, and boats are not buildings with chimneys. In order to change, in order to expand the SCA to include boats and not just buildings with chimneys, would have needed different. It would have needed a different sort of legal route to do so, which we didn't think was worth doing. The other point is that it's sort of about options, really. So there's a very good 2018 DEFRA study about who burns wood and why, usually in buildings. And certainly in a place like Oxford, people burning wood inside buildings with chimneys are tending to do so for I will say vibes reasons, because they like it, not because they do not have another source of heating. However, when it comes to moored boats, that is not the case. There are very limited options for how you can heat such dwellings. So including boat dwellers at this point, when there are basically no options really, no viable options on the table for them to change, basically feels a bit like punching down, which is why we did not take the extra legal step to include them at this point.
Question AR3, do you have a supplementary, Councillor Henwood? Question AR4, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do, yeah. So referring back to St James's Street and the emissions emitted that moved from the LTN onwards still means that there's an increase of 15% on St James's Street, which also means that the Labour-supported LTN scheme continues to be bad news for cyclists and residents living near an LTN scheme. Investigations by the IOA's Judith Harley has gone into the accuracy of the measuring of these filters and has identified a tolerance of plus minus 5%, which could mean that St James's Street could be as high as 20%. To make the city cleaner, a lower life expectancy in areas such as Blackbird Leys, Littlemore and Rose Hill is likely to increase as more traffic from the city is pushed onto the ring road near these residential areas. Why is Labour Group determined to pursue policies of inequality in the detriment of these poorer communities?
I'm not entirely sure that was a supplementary question, but Councillor Railton, do you have a response?
Yes, Lord Mayor. Okay, so there's various bits here. So, I mean, what has happened here is cherry picking of a single figure from a single year and then just sort of ignoring everything else. I think you do have to take things in the entire context. You can't just pick a single diffusion tube on a single road on a single year and just completely disregard what's happened on the other 126 of them. So, you know, even on James Street, when you look at the 2023 figures, it's gone back down again. You know, and also I think, you know, certainly when you're talking about the East Oxford LTN, you can't really discount the fact that for about 10,000 people, air quality got 20% better. And certainly, you know, if you look at the figures for 2023, not just 2022, not just a single diffusion tube, if you look at, you know, the boundary roads for all of the LTN schemes, they basically fell by exactly the same percentage on average as the rest of the city. So I think, you know, I'm a bit, yeah, there's a bit of cherry picking going on here. You know, when it comes to accuracy, I mean, it is what it is, and that's why, you know, you can't just take, you know, this is why the diffusion tubes are aggregated over an entire year and not just a single month, is to control stuff like this. And certainly, you know, you mentioned Blackbird Leys, Littlemore, Rose Hill in these. I mean, there was nothing in either the 2022 or 2023 report that in any way suggested air quality in those places had got worse. So, yeah, I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Question AR5. Do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Question AR6. Councillor Fairweather. Do you have a supplementary? Question AR7. Councillor Rahman. Do you have a supplementary?
No.
And question AR8. Do you have a supplementary?
I don't.
Thank you. A question AR9. Supplementary?
I do. So, going back to the Grand Pond, prior to planning permission being granted, trees were felled, and it wasn't some, it was quite a few, just for the nesting season. But now that you've got a JV going on, who's going to plant those trees and where those birds are going to nest now? Because the presumptive method of felling the trees before contradicts what we try to aim here and have a greener and fairer city. There's no guarantee of that funding. And how long are those trees, how long is it going to take before those trees come back?
Councillor Ailton.
Okay, so the trees in question were self-seeded around 40 years ago when the Grand Pond, I guess, gasworks was basically decommissioned and capped. You know, this is intensely contaminated land, which has basically a very large amount of clay dumped on top of it. So, you know, this is where these trees have come from. It was a mixture of ash, sycamore, and I think crack willow. So, you know, yes, these were cut down in around, a few of these were cut down in February this year. I've slightly forgotten what the question is here. So, oh yes, I mean, I think there is, I mean, we have already stated there is a commitment to do the replanting no matter if the bridge is built or not. If the bridge is built, there is an extensive replanting programme. If the bridge is not built, then it will basically be replanted to return it to how it was. I think that's all I've got. Yeah, thank you.
Question AR10. Councillor Yateman, do you have a supplementary? AR11, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, but thank you to Councillor Ailton for the clear and detailed response.
Question LA1, Councillor Rahman, do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary, but I would like to thank the Councillor for a very clear response.
AR1. Oh, LA1, sorry.
Do beg your pardon.
We haven't spot places quite yet. I don't have, well, I do have one thing to say, that if my questions don't get answered, I'll just keep asking them again and again. So I would just, with respect, say that if we asked a question, instead of just giving an answer, you give answer the question instead of just saying something. So to Councillor Arshad, thank you, and I'll contact you by email to arrange some stuff. Thank you.
Thanks. That wasn't a question, so I'm not going to ask Councillor Arshad for an answer. In the minutes, I have no question LA2. Is that a typo? Officers, thank you. The question is down as LA3. Councillor Mundy, do you have a supplementary?
Apologies, LA3?
3, do you have a supplementary?
Yeah, I have a supplementary. Councillor Arshad, would you be able to discuss whether you think there's sufficient training for the use of defibs among the population? Thank you.
Councillor Arshad.
For this answer, I will answer you on email if that's okay, so I can find out further information on it, on specifically how.
Okay, I look forward to that follow-up. Thank you, Councillor Arshad.
LA4, Councillor Mundy, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. So, Councillor Arshad will be aware of the recent news from the government's own figures that 100,000 pensioners are expected to fall into poverty by the end of the decade due to the changes to the winter fuel benefit. I would just like to know whether the councillor has an idea of how many of our local pensioners are likely to fall into poverty, and if not, why we wouldn't have an idea of that, and how we could hope to help people if we don't know that, and also whether Safer Oxford will be issuing a press release to highlight to the population of Oxford the importance of safeguarding and looking out for their pensioner neighbours.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I don't think this is on Councillor Arshad's portfolio, as the reply points out, but Councillor Brown, do you have a response to the question?
No, I do not understand why this question is being put to Councillor Arshad. I don't understand why the first question was being put to her, and the supplementary certainly isn't for Councillor Arshad to answer. I think if Councillor Mundy wants to make political points and ask questions, he needs to ask them to the right cabinet member.
Can I finish the second part of my question, please, Lord Mayor?
Thanks. Have we identified which cabinet member it's a question to? Because it's not part of Councillor Arshad's portfolio. Councillor Brown, are you willing to respond to the question?
I mean, it's hard to work out what the question is, because I think it was really mainly a political statement.
Can I ask the question again so it's clearer?
I think if Councillor Mundy wants to make his political statement and put a question at the end of it, of all the cabinet members he might wish to put it to, I would suggest that Councillor Chapman is probably the most relevant cabinet member to pick it up, if that's okay, Councillor Chapman.
Councillor Chapman, do you have a response?
It was more of a statement than a question, but I'll try and elicit a question from the statement.
I'd just like to know whether we have an idea of the number of pensioners in Oxford who are likely to fall into poverty by the end of the decade as a result of this cut to the fuel benefit. Thank you.
That would be hard for us to discern at this point. What I can tell you is that we think there are about 800 potential pensioners who could be eligible for pension credit, and we have written to all of those asking them whether they'd like to apply, and so far the response has been quite low. And that, frankly, has been a situation right across the country. It's not just in Oxford. The other thing I'd say is that we are doing everything we can to support people. So we have advice centres where people can come in and get advice about all the various funds that are available to them to claim extra financial support. We have the Household Support Fund, which was extended by this government, and extra funds were put into it. So there are a number of things going on here to help wherever we can, and we will continue to do that. Obviously, we don't have an infinite amount of money, but we are making sure that there is a lot of information available to people. So if they wish to apply either for one-off grants to support them with their their energy bills, which is the Housing Support Fund, or long-term support through the pension credit, both of those are available. And we've been one of the most active councils in the country, frankly, in relation to disseminating that information to those who we think are most likely to be in need.
Thank you. Sorry, can I finish my follow-up question, Lord Mayor, please?
Sorry, we don't have a time for a second supplementary, I'm afraid. Councillor LA5, Councillor Kerr, noise complaints.
No further.
Thank you. Question NC1, Councillor Rahman, community centre cafes. Any supplementary? Take it that's a no. Question NC2, any supplementary?
No.
Thank you. Question NC3, Councillor Yateman, any supplementary?
Yes, I just wonder if the Cabinet member could just share details regarding the controls in place between ODS and the contractor. So a couple of times now Mr Artwell's kind of identified concerns with it, so it'd be good to just have some visibility of what steps are being taken.
Councillor Chapman.
I refer Councillor Yateman to the very comprehensive report that I put together on glyphosate use in the city about a year ago. But from my memory, the issues around that, these are contractors, and there are contractors obviously used to deliver the service. First of all, there's extensive training for contractors. They don't just turn up in the morning and pick up a load of glyphosate and wander around the streets and spray it everywhere. Secondly, there is highly targeted use of the spraying in the first place. So very much at individual weeds, not covering whole pavements. And regular reviews of their service. So I'm confident that we are carrying out the use of glyphosate in a responsible manner.
Question NC4, Councillor Jafari Mabini, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Is there going to be some inspections after the current recent floods at the work of the tarmacking? Because there was a lot of concern by residents around the quality of the tarmac, and I know there was a subcontractor and there has been, you've given a comprehensive answer, but I'd like to know if there's going to be any further visits after the flooding. And again, about just openness about those visits. I think the residents will be reassured to see that there have been visits done, and that it's because there are concerns that elderly people are going to be falling on the uneven surfaces. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Well, I think it would be very helpful if councillors report individual cases to me. I mean, I can't be, across all the individual stories right across the city, but if there are individual stories that you, councillor, or any other councillor in this chamber has where they're concerned about the effect of flooding upon recent repairs, then please bring them to my attention and I will pursue them.
Point of order, Lord Mayor, regarding the to and fro that just took place about referring questions around. Can I just quickly note that the Constitution says that whilst the Cabinet members may redirect questions to one another, they aren't allowed to redirect supplementaries to one another. The reference being 1111B. I'll stop being a SWAT now.
Thank you for that advice. It may be that. It may be the Constitution Review should have a look at that rather than a Cabinet member having to say that a member will receive a response by email from a different Cabinet member. I accept your point, but I think it is better for public accountability to question receives and answer whoever it may be from. NC5, do you have a supplementary?
No further, thanks.
Question NC6. It is marked down here as a question to Councillor Smith, but I take it that's a typo since it's full. Yes, it falls within Councillor Chapman's portfolio. Do you have a supplementary? No. Question NC7, Councillor Mundy. Do you have a supplementary?
Yes. There are still enduring concerns about the availability of the service for the LEVC taxi cab holders. Will ODS be able to provide a version of a sort of courtesy taxi service for those that are waiting for that extra period of time to get their taxis repaired? Will the service be able to keep up with what we have to assume is going to be an increase of about 70 taxis over the next 13 months or so, if they're going to get a 100% of all the taxis reaching the zero emission standards?
Councillor Chapman.
If I could take the second part first. I know that ODS is very, very keen to expand its capacity in this area, and as it becomes evident that there is greater demand for these services, then I'm sure they will not be slow, because it's obviously a commercial opportunity to employ more staff to do so. The issue of courtesy taxis is an interesting one. I can't make up policy, ODS policy here on the hoof, so I will come back to you and give you their reaction to that rather ingenious idea. Thank you.
Question CM1, Councillor Gant, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Thank you. I'm very grateful for the frank apology in the response. That's appreciated. However, Wolverhampton Cricket Club has raised a substantial amount of money which it wants to put to use providing services for young players. And this council's been sitting on that for 2 years now. And you're now telling me it's going to take another 3 months. I'm not a lawyer, but this is a lease for a cricket net. It doesn't sound like a very complicated document. Can we please do it quicker than that?
Councillor Munkonge.
Thank you, Councillor Gad. We will do it as quickly as we can by March 2025, so it must be sooner, probably. Thank you.
CM2, Councillor Fairweather, do you have a supplementary? CM3, Councillor Rahman, Cemetery, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Thank you for all the work that you've been doing on this. So given that, hopefully if everything's okay and it starts by autumn 25, when do you envisage the work will be completed and the cemetery will be used? It's good to know about Muslim burials as well, but I didn't really ask about that one.
Councillor Munkonge.
Thank you so much. You and I will have worked on this project, and as you know, it's quite complicated, so I wouldn't specifically say the timeline, as we are waiting for the Environment Agency to test the underwater, the ground underwater. Thank you.
CM4, Councillor Yateman, do you have a supplementary?
No, thank you.
CM5, Councillor Jafari Mabini, supplementary?
If the answer from Mr. Kassam is no, will there be, will the councillor look at other options of possibilities of continuing it at a different site locally?
Councillor Munkonge.
Thank you. We can look at that options. As you know, areas or places are very difficult to find, but thank you. We'll try to look at the options.
CM6, Councillor Powell, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Thank you, Councillor Munkonge, for your response here. I obviously agree that measures will need to differ event by event, but just on the specific question of the fireworks, I think residents this year saw a really marked improvement in the state of the park. And firstly, thank you very much to all concerned for that. My email inbox is considerably happier than it was previously. So can I just get a confirmation that in regard to the specific fireworks event, what we saw this year will be a new minimum standard? It's always going to be at the same time of year, and I think that would be such a big reassurance to residents.
Councillor Munkonge.
Thank you. I would say that is a template because obviously it also depends on the weather. So we'll do our utmost to repeat the success of this year fireworks. Thank you.
Question LS1, Councillor Henwood, do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary for LS1 and LS2.
Thank you. Question LS3, Councillor Rahman, any supplementary?
None on 3 and 4.
3 and 4, excellent, thank you. Question LS5, Councillor Mundy, do you have a supplementary?
No supplementary for 5 or 6.
Thank you. LS7, Councillor Jafari Melbini, any supplementary?
I do. Is it possible to use any procurement powers during the partnership workings to try and look at the costs of housing association housing and as well as the maintenance? Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
I don't know what procurement you're talking about. If you want to be more precise, then I can give you an answer. Maybe it's best conducted by email.
Question LS8, any supplementary?
There has been, at the last council, there was some discussion around the site going to be in the Littlemore parish being asked to provide some support by Councillor Upton, I think, spoke about this. I've been told that the Littlemore Parish Council has a very strong view that there is already not any more capacity for players from that site to be placed in Littlemore. So I was wondering what the backup option would be if that wasn't an option.
Councillor Smith.
It's still very much a work in progress. There's no planning application yet for the Sandy Lane site, but as the written answer says, you know, the relocation of those football pitches will be a condition of any planning application. So there'll need to be more work will need to be done if the Littlemore site isn't an option.
Question LS9, I believe, is actually from Councillor Stairs. Thank you, Councillor Henwood, for correcting the error. Any supplementary?
No supplementary.
Thank you. Move on to Cabinet Member for Planning. Question LU1, Councillor Miles. Any supplementary? LU2, any supplementary?
Regarding Collins Street redevelopment, would you be willing to explore the use of the application for grant funding to improve the public realm outside the new flats on Collins Street? Because it's a great entrance to both East Oxford Primary School and also children in the A2 Dominion building who are already there use it as a play space, but it's also recognised by the police locally as a crime hotspot. So would you be willing to maybe explore what funding could be available to make it a more desirable play area for the local residents there? Thank you.
Councillor Upton.
Sorry, that sounds like a reasonable proposition as long as you're talking about looking for grant funding and you're not talking about a budget bid for the City Council, then that sounds reasonable to me, yes.
Question LU3, Councillor Smoten. Any supplementary?
There we go. Yes, Lord Mayor. So I thank you for the response. I'll take issue specifically with the part that's about Oxford's buildable internal green belt not containing any sites of significant size. I note that in the 2017 review, we left the 60-hectare buildable non-floodplain site, which is the fields around Marston Ferry Road, on the table, and at which, if one were to spec it to low car, high density, it's a plausible site to get 4,000, 5,000 dwellings on. At the time, the review gave high priority to protecting the countryside and also to preventing Marston from growing westwards. But of course, concurrently, we also grew outwards into Bayswater, which had very similar impacts, just in a different direction. Will we at least give a robust check and challenge to the rejection of that site and the decision that that site was improper or that was not suitable under the new rules that are coming forwards?
Councillor Upton.
I'm sure we absolutely will give a very thorough look at that one. If it's the bit I'm thinking of, that is generally underwater every time it floods. So you're not thinking about that bit, okay. As I say, we've previously had to prove that we've looked for sort of every really possible bit of green belt that we could build on that is not floodplain or triple SI, which most of ours is. So I don't know the precise reasons that particular one was rejected last time, but I'm sure we will be looking at it again.
LU4, Councillor Smoten, do you have a supplementary?
I do indeed. Will the Council consider once again the need for policy to prioritise upwards growth over outwards growth, and particularly to ensure that our definition of well-designed does not suppress breaking the roofline in places where increased density is desirable, and to stretch ourselves to find places where we think increased density is desirable?
Councillor Upton.
Well, as I said in the reply, we did respond positively to that proposed change in the MPPF, so we are absolutely open to that. But it's not up to us to go out to a developer and say, hey, why don't you make that an 8-storey thing rather than the 3- or 4-storey thing that you're thinking of? So we will respond positively to planning applications as they come forward. As I say, it will, of course, need to be well designed. We're not going to let something that will become a carbuncle, should we say, be built. But I see no reason why we would not welcome a well-designed project of this sort coming forward.
Question LU5, any supplementary?
In for a penny, Lord Mayor. With the expressed intent to use the new standard method here, and with neighbours being obliged to it in the near future, and considering the Planning Inspectorate's clear steer to maximum cooperation, will the city make every effort to at least offer joint and cooperative planning on the city's immediate fringe?
Councillor Upton.
The city made every conceivable effort to do that up until a couple of years ago when several of our surrounding authorities walked away from negotiations about that. We'd be delighted if they will come back and talk to us. They certainly didn't when they were creating their new local plans, which they are trying to rush through before December. So if you would put that question to our surrounding districts as well, we'd be delighted.
Question LU6, Councillor Gant, any supplementary?
Yes, please. I'm grateful once again for the frank apology. That is genuinely welcome. However, I would like the councillor to recognise just what a serious problem this is. I've mentioned in my question a grant of SIL funds, which actually was delayed for so long that the quote was about to expire, and the grant receiver had to pay for it from their own resources. At the AGM of one of the neighbourhood forums in my patch recently, it was announced that £59,000 has not been released by this council. And at the other neighbourhood forum AGM, the chair has said to me, the answer given is not true. I'm not aware of any such approach to my neighbourhood forum about delays. My question was, what we need is a timescale. Will you commit to a timescale by which, if a grant is approved, it will be paid?
Councillor Upton.
Obviously, I cannot do that sitting here at this moment now, but I will commit to asking our officers to do their utmost best, because I absolutely agree that, particularly in the instance you've just raised there, if a quote is about to expire, then it must be really, really frustrating to have not had money that they know is coming. So I guess, yeah, they will do their best.
Question LU7, Councillor Fairweather, do you have a supplementary? LU8, do you have a supplementary?
Yes, I do. Can the Cabinet member tell me whether the condition which she refers to in a written response, which says an adopted local plan will not be considered out of date if it can demonstrate a 5-year supply of deliverable housing sites and has delivered at least 75% of its housing requirement over the last 3 years, has actually been met?
Councillor Upton.
Okay, I'm not 100% sure whether that will be met by the middle of next year, but I think so. But can I get back to you on the detail of that? But I think we are on track. But I'll get back to you.
Question LU9, Councillor Rahman, do you have a supplementary?
I do, thank you. Yeah, so Network Rail requested you to keep quiet on the extended period of closure, and they were going to give you some extra benefits and stuff. So I understand we're not responsible for the county council or the network or anything like that. However, when you were informed, you stated last time that they informed yourself that they were working on some improvements or some benefits that they could add. So I was just wondering, in all that time, have they shown you anything? That's nothing to do with who controls the scheme or who manages the transport.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you. Yeah, I think we're probably all very frustrated by the situation we're in with Network Rail and the closure of the Botley Road. We do get updates from them reasonably regularly about the situation, but to be honest, they still are not able to give us a timeline of when it will be when Botley Road will be reopening. They're not even sure what the budget envelope that is remaining is going to cover. So So yeah, I can't give you any more updates. But sorry, but actually, what you really were asking were why did we say when we said last time that they didn't let us all know immediately? I mean, it was only a couple of weeks later that the news became general. And they said that they were looking at what other improvements they could make. I think probably, yeah, the only thing they came back with was that the increasing the frequency of the free shuttle that runs from Botley round, and maybe some better lighting in the tunnel that goes underneath. But I guess really there's not an awful lot more they can do on this enormous infrastructure project that has turned out to be much more complicated than they were expecting.
Question LU10, any supplementary?
Yeah, might be a long one. So, I mean, I've noted in the answer that you said you didn't want to penalise people that already got electric taxis. Now I'm on the understanding that it would be an improvement, so I don't see the penalty that they get. Also, the actual question said is that would you be open to representations for the additional impact of Botley Bridge? As you just answered, it's another year as a minimum. It could be even longer. So therefore, I don't understand why you're not open, because circumstances changed last time when I asked the question. You know, now they've got another year of Botley closed. Even in the previous answer, the leader's written to the VOA to help businesses on Botley. So why don't you extend that to the last few, maybe couple of dozen taxi drivers that really struggle to change from their current taxis to electric cabs? Because we do all expect that as time's going on, they are going that way anyway.
Councillor Upton.
I'm afraid the decision doesn't rest with me anyway. This is something that the General Purpose Licensing Committee decides. So, yeah, I'm very happy to listen to representations, but this is something that is decided by that committee, who have discussed this several times and do really appreciate that, you know, this is difficult. But we are aware that it is becoming much more financially reasonable to switch. As you mentioned yourself, the servicing costs are becoming lower and lower. So, you know, we're having to balance improving our air quality on one side, which is about everybody's health, and sticking to our taxi licensing requirements on the other side. Sorry.
Question LU11, Councillor Munn, did you have a supplementary?
Yes, please. Councillor Upton, what means would we have, including through liaison with the County Council Highways Authority, to ensure fair public access to public infrastructure such as cycle racks? And what means would we have for the prevention of unfair usage, such as by businesses, as has happened in this case on Jowett Walk? Thank you.
To be honest, I have absolutely no idea, because it is a problem if we've got our public bike racks that we've spent a long time getting traffic regulation orders, etc., and paid for them to go in, to find that they are then filled with business bikes rather than general public's bikes. I don't think we have any legal recourse, but I mean, I don't know, short of launching a PSPO or something, but I will talk to our licensing or regulation team, see if there's anything we can do. But my understanding there's probably is nothing. Otherwise, I think us or the county perhaps would have done something already.
Question LU12, any supplementary?
No supplementary for LU12 or LU25.
Anticipating. Brilliant, thank you. Question LU13, Councillor Jafari Mabini, any supplementary?
No supplementary.
LU14, Councillor Kerr, any supplementary?
No supplementary for 14, 15 or 16.
Thank you. Councillor, question LU17, Councillor Henwood, any supplementary?
Supplementary.
LU18, any supplementary?
Yes, Chair. Yes, Lord Mayor. The portfolio holder is correct. The biodiversity appraisal should be part of the planning application. The planning application also stated that follow-up reports would be gathered to study the impact of the scheme on biodiversity. Is it these reports which are not part of the original planning application that I'm referring to? So it's the follow-up reports.
Councillor Upton.
I don't know what happens to those kind of reports. So you say there's follow-up reports that were made after the application was approved? monitoring report. I'll find out for you and, yeah, let you know.
Question LU19, any supplementary?
Sorry, Lord Mayor.
Sill,
Yes.
Newman Place.
So the portfolio holder acknowledges that 70 to 80% of the received SIL contribution sorry, Lord Mayor, I'm going to retract that. No supplementary.
Thank you. LU20, any supplementary? This is on S106 development funds.
Actually, the portfolio holder has already answered that question in a different question. Thank you.
LU21, parking fees, any supplementary?
No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
LU22, Councillor Stairs, any supplementary?
No supplementary,
Thank you. LU23, Councillor Jafari Marbini, any supplementary?
Yes, please. This is an area of huge concern for residents who are already there about what facilities, how facilities are going to be changed and upgraded to meet the demand so that inequalities are not worsened. I was wondering, thank you for the response, but I was wondering what lines of accountability are going to be used to ensure that whether the county, the ICB, whoever is responsible for the various aspects, does ensure that these changes happen to meet the demands, the extra demands that are going to be there in Northfield Brook. Thank you.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you. Well, yes, as you do understand that the local plan can enable things to happen. It can allow things to happen, but it can't force things to happen. But I think one positive point I can share is that the Future Oxfordshire Partnership Planning Group, which has representatives from all of the Oxfordshire districts and the ICB on it. Through that group, I particularly pressed for the ICB to start really engaging with the planning authorities so that when we do get big developments coming forward, we actually have a plan from them about what they need in terms of health facilities so that we can then ensure that developers can contribute to that. And I believe this is one of the first ICBs to actually appoint a planning specialist to their staff, whose job it is to come and liaise with the planning authorities like us. So I think that is a really positive step towards hopefully getting better health provision planned in future.
LU24, Councillor Henwood, any supplementary?
No supplementary, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. That concludes questions on notice from members of council. Well done, everybody. I suggest that we take the item 17A now before we go for a break. And I believe that is Councillor Munkonge to introduce a report from Children's Trust Board. Is that correct? Councillor Munkonge.
Yes, that's me, your Lord Mayor. Members, this report in front of you is just to update for your noting the wonderful job that we have been doing as a council towards our young people. Also to report the structure of the Children Trust Board that was nearly scrapped, but it has been restated and restructured. The report in front of you outlines most of the things that we do as a council, and obviously I must emphasize that this report is in conjunction with our partners. It goes to mention, for example, the youth hub in the lease, the work that you do with Move Together, You Move, and the work that our localities managers do to our young people. So I ask you to note the report in front of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any points or questions on the report? Seeing none. Good. There is, I understand, no scrutiny committee update today. Is that correct, Councillor Miles? Thank you. So we will reconvene at 7 when we will deal with items, the three main items, 15, 16 and 19. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. We are now on agenda item 15, public addresses and questions that don't relate to matters for decision at this meeting. And I believe the first address is from Margaret Simpson. Do we have Margaret? Sorry. Margaret, welcome. You have up to 5 minutes.
Fine. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thank you, councillors. My name is Margaret Simpson. I am chair of Oxford 50 Plus Network, Ox Talk, which is the talking newspaper for the blind, and I organise the United Nations Older People's Day, which is held here in the town hall, and this year was the 13th year. I've been a My Vision Oxfordshire trustee for over 10 years. I also engage with various social care, health and community groups here in the city and with the two universities. The motion making Oxford a truly walkable city is one I wish to support on behalf of the groups and organisations mentioned. Why? Because the Lord Mayor this year has walked and marked the city boundaries. Within these boundaries live 1,000 of permanent Oxford residents, and it is for these residents that Oxford should be a truly welcoming and walkable city. Residents who are of all ages, of varying physical abilities and needs, irrespective of whether they pay council tax or not. By welcoming, I mean that for all the residents who live in the area referred to as the City of Oxford, they will find travelling about the city to be a pleasurable experience. That they find, whether they're walking, cycling, or using their mobility aid, that they do so in the certain knowledge that whether their journey is short or long, either to or from work, or for socialising and relaxation, it proves to be a good experience. As councillors, you are endeavouring to establish Oxford as a leading e-city with clean air, with safe, clear, appropriate, pleasurable walkways, welcoming multi-use retail areas, with an increased number of charging points for e-vehicles in and around the localities. In order to achieve this in a historic city, which has already well-established areas, you will obviously have to consider balancing the current needs of your residents with the needs of the future residents and future developmental needs. Consideration must be given to the infrastructure of the future e-city and the localities individually, which form part of the whole. Can there be connecting uncluttered walkways and socialisation areas with varied and appropriate seating and locality hubs with toilets and drinking water? Include, if and where appropriate, multi-use areas which are used with consideration and respect by all. Residents in all localities need to feel safe, so they will be encouraged to visit and shop and socialise locally. So the need for open communal areas with clear sight lines is important. As elected city councillors, you are responsible for the city as a whole, as well as being involved in the localities for which you have been elected to represent. But you cannot make the whole city the walkable city we wish for immediately. So the where and the how to start, and suggestions for possible aims which could be considered are: consider the areas to be developed as areas owned and shared by the residents, areas which residents will be proud of and will wish to support continually into the future. Ask for their help to assist you in planning and driving forward the aims of the truly walkable Oxford. Consider workable partnerships with representation from all the various age groups in the locality, a mixed gender group, encouraging residents from the hidden groups to be involved, as well as parents of preschool children, young adults and students, older residents, and include retailers. A representative voluntary group working with the interested local councillors, led by a community representative. Within Oxford, there are many established interest groups which can be referred to for specific advice, as and when required, such as Oxford Preservation Trust, Oxford Pedestrian Association, Safer Pavements for All, Headington Action, the community centres, Age-Friendly Oxford, Unlimited, My Vision Oxfordshire, and other specifics to the locality.
30 seconds.
Look at the area as it actually is. Without access to large budgets, you cannot go altering the physicality of the area. I am making the assumption that it will have to be accepted, but what is currently in place, i.e. road layouts, pavements, commercial street uses, will have to remain, but they could be considered for improvement or amendment. Plan to improve the appearance and usage of the area, and by that I mean improve pavement surfaces so they are safe for all to use, encourage attractive shop window displays, and clean street shop frontages, reduce unnecessary non-fixed street furniture such as A-boards and other advertising materials, and make the local area more socially aware with attractive social seating, creating relaxation.
Time's up, sorry.
Sorry? I can continue, thank you. Make the local area more socially aware with attractive social seating, creating relaxation and rest areas, and encourage pride in the local area with community planted areas, for example, free to all herbs. In the central area of Oxford, engage Here to Help volunteers to assist the visitors who have the map the wrong way round or find the directional display boards not easy to understand. Promote the consideration and respect of all users in the multi-use areas, a priority which is a responsibility for us all. On behalf of Oxford residents and visitors to Oxford, I ask that you consider approving and accepting this motion, and in so doing, you will invite members of the Oxford community to be involved. A city community truly engaged in working together. Thank you.
Thank you, Margaret. And do we have a response to the address? Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Lord Mayor, and many thanks for your address, Margaret, and for the really important work you continue to do for older people in our city. Walking and, of course, cycling are the best ways of getting around our city and often the quickest too. The County Council is, of course, the Highways Authority and takes lead responsibility for managing Oxford's roads and pavements. However, this council has always supported both walking and cycling wherever we can. And we're also keen to ensure the parks and other outdoor spaces we're responsible for are attractive and appealing places for people of all ages to enjoy. I know that you've been involved personally in a project around safer pavements with one of our former older people's champions, something that benefits residents and visitors of all ages. And alongside this, I know that you're also working with council officers to see how we may be able to support Oxford to qualify as an age-friendly city. So may I thank you on behalf of Council for all the work that you're doing on that. Making Oxford a place more people want to and are able to walk around safely and easily is one of the ways of achieving that. So thank you very much again for your address and also for the work that you're doing.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown.
Our second address is from Mr. Colin Aldridge. Do we have Mr. Aldridge? Mr. Aldridge, thank you for coming. You have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you. Hello. I came here about 3 years ago with an address about drug consumption rooms. When I did this, a Labour councillor replied, "We will not get anywhere until this showering government has gone." Well, that shower's now gone. So I'm back. While I believe illegal drug taking is detrimental to someone's health, I also realise some will choose to do so. Criminalising drug use is not working. There are so many in our society who now realise this, of course, for action needs to change and become a health challenge. Forcing people into rehab through the criminal justice system does not work, as the majority are not willing participants. We can only improve the situation by having people wanting to change their actions. DCRs have been used in several countries with varying amounts of success, but always success. I have 2 quotes from websites with addresses which you are welcome to look at. The rate of drug poisoning deaths in 2023, 93 deaths per million, was double the rate in 2012, 46.5. The rate has increased every year since 2012, after remaining relatively stable over the preceding 2 decades. And the second quote, in summary, the benefits of providing supervised drug consumption facilities may include improvements in safe, hygienic drug use, especially among regular users, increased access to health and social services, and reduced public drug use and associated nuisances. There is no evidence to suggest that the availability of safer injecting facilities increases drug use or frequency of injection. These services facilitate rather than delay treatment entry and do not result in higher rates of local drug-related crime. There are 2 more links to a trial in Glasgow showing how they work, if you wish to look at them. I would like the Oxford City Councillors to come together to write a cross-party letter to government asking for a change in the law, at very least, permission for a trial in Oxford City. I hope you can get behind this idea and finally make a difference in so many lives. Thank you.
Thank you for your address. Is there a response?
Yes, Lord.
Councillor Arshad.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your address. While I am aware that research does suggest that drug consumption rooms can help to reduce harm and deaths among drug users, the implementation of this policy remains controversial, and not least in the medical profession, and is not currently proposed. I do want to point out it is also not supported by Turning Point, our local experts in this field. Thank you.
Thank you. The next address is from Caddy Beck. Thank you for coming. You have up to 5 minutes.
I am here to express my opposition to the appropriation of Bertie Park and to highlight OCC Cabinet's failure to consider the law governing appropriation. The local government lawyer website states, local authorities frequently use powers to appropriate land from one statutory purpose to another. This is often treated as purely an administrative matter, but there are some instances where local authorities should exercise a significant degree of caution. A well-advised council will always take care to ensure that all proper procedures are followed. Councillors have indeed told us that appropriation is a paper exercise, that the land is simply being moved from one budget to another. But Section 122 of the 1972 Local Government Act states that a principal council may appropriate any land which belongs to the council and is no longer required for the purpose for which it is held immediately before the appropriation. You say that Bertie Park is no longer required for its current purpose, as all current functions of the site will continue to be available following the development. Your lawyers state it is not the council's assertion that the land to be appropriated in this case is surplus to requirements, but that it is no longer needed for its present use, as alternative facilities will be made available. These facilities will be provided within Site A. You want to appropriate 80% of our recreation ground. This is the bit that's appropriated, and you want to re-provide it on a postage stamp within the remaining 20%. The appropriated land consists of a multi-use games area, or MUGA, which is used for five-a-side football, basketball, etc., a small strip of the existing playground, and the whole of the grassed area used for free play. You say the MUGA will be 24% smaller, but still offers, this is quoting you, still offers the facilities to local people to access space for free play and court games. If the MUGA is being used for court games, there will be nowhere for free play at all. This means a 100% reduction in space for free play. And nobody has been able to reassure us that the smaller MUGA will be suitable for either football or basketball. Your 2040 plan suggested that the MUGA would disappear altogether. In the Cabinet meeting on the 16th of October, we argued that the assertion that the new, smaller MUGA could fulfill current needs for court games and free play was Wednesbury unreasonable, i.e., barking mad. As a council, you are obliged to follow the law. Cabinet members were not asked to consider whether a reasonable authority could hold that a 344-metre squared MUGA could fulfil these needs. Instead, you argued that it would be unreasonable not to appropriate the land because this would prevent construction of any housing on the site. You want to build 300 homes on Redbridge Paddock, 31 homes on Bertie Park. There will be other developments across the area. At the same time, you want to downgrade our facilities for young adults and downgrade our only community amenity. You claim that the loss will be offset by providing better access to an area that Thames Valley Police say is unsafe for unaccompanied children. Our community thinks that this is unreasonable. This is why people are so angry. The law is not an inconvenience. In this case, it is there to protect recreational facilities like ours, which you agree are needed. As a member of the Save Bertie Park campaign, I have asked for judicial review of your decision to appropriate the land on Bertie Park. I ask you as councillors to decide whether you will gamble ratepayers' money on winning this case. Angela Rayner recently assured us that the UK government is not considering building on recreation grounds in its efforts to solve the UK housing crisis. So why are you so determined to build on ours?
Thank you. Is there a response? Sir Turner.
Thank you for your address. Cabinet approved the appropriation of part of the land at Bertie Place Recreation Ground on the 16th of October 2024 and did so properly and lawfully. As there has been legal correspondence on this issue, we're advised that we are not able to comment further on this at this point, but we do note the comments you've made.
And finally, we have 2 questions from Mr. Artwell. Hello. You have up to 5 minutes, but your address and question are extremely short, but please do proceed.
Following on from the conclusion from the 2011 Thames Valley Police Constabularies Operation Bullfinch public inquiry, and as a method of publicly marking the harm which was allowed to occur against 373 Caucasian Christian heritage pupils, some of which were vulnerable and in local authority care, will the elected Oxford City councillors support my call for a monument to be placed in Oxford to atone for allowing harm to occur to the children of Oxfordshire?
Do we have a response?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Child sexual exploitation is a heinous crime. I've read the full safeguarding report into the Bullfinch cases many times because it's important that we fully understand the issues that led to this abuse not being challenged for so long. There were important lessons to be learned from the report, not least the importance of listening to people raising concerns, whether professionals or victims. However, what is not required is for you to make yet another attempt to stir up issues around race and culture in a way that seeks to undermine community cohesion in our city. There are assumptions made about the ethnicity and even the religion of the victims in your statement, which none of us can know, nor do I see the relevance. What happened in the Bullfinch case a decade ago was truly awful. Thankfully, many lessons have been learned by the police, the County Council's Children's Services team, and indeed our own council. The most important legacy from Bullfinch is the improvements made by all those involved in child safeguarding in Oxfordshire. I would hope that the priority of keeping our children and young people safe from harm would be a matter of concern that could unite us all. It should not be a political football with which to create division.
Mr. Artwell, you have a question.
Oxford specifically, and England's noble centuries of free, critical speech and lampooning traditions have been copied by most of the parliaments of the world. Will Oxford City Council continue to uphold England's 1215 Magna Carta granted free, critical speech and noble free speech traditions, which can conflict with today's politically correct creed?
Do we have a response? Councillor Brown.
I found that somewhat difficult to follow, but if you're asking if this council upholds free speech, then the fact that this is the 9th time you've addressed this chamber in the past 3 years would indicate that we certainly do.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I seldom make such statements, and I hope it is not an abuse of my position as Lord Mayor to do so. But for Council to have any commemoration or monument to the victims of heinous crimes which was conditional on the ethnicity or the religious identity of those victims is not something that that I would contemplate supporting, and I am sure that that is the same around this chamber. Thank you. We now move on to agenda item number 16. We have a petition We will hear, first of all, we will hear the petitioner. Petition organiser, thank you very much for coming. You have up to 5 minutes.
This is more terrifying than I thought it would be, and this is a very, very different subject to the one you've just addressed. Lord Mayor, councillors, officers, thank you very much for giving us time to speak. My name is Josie Proctor. I'm presenting a petition on behalf of Oxplay, me and my emotional support, Fox. We are a group of residents asking you to build a children's playground in the city centre. The petition has, at the last count, 1,878 signatures. We believe that Oxford City is great for retail and history and culture, but not for families. We believe a barrier for families from all over the city and the county and elsewhere who could spend time and money in the city is the lack of a play space for kids to safely burn off energy between stops. We want to buy our school shoes in the city centre and not online, but it's hard. The closest player areas to the city centre are Friars Wharf, Jericho and the Angel and Greyhound, which are too far for little legs on a city centre trip. You only have to look at the smiles on the faces of the children using the recently installed carousel on Broad Street, great idea, to see the joy a play area would bring. Now, at the beginning of the month, we took this petition to the County Council and we asked them to work with this council on providing road space. We're delighted to say that they are supportive of this initiative and happy to work with the council on it. Now, their response indicated that officers here may indeed already have begun work on such a project. And if that's the case, we would like to thank the officers for the work already started and bring our voices here in support. Now, at this point, because this is not a political motion, we would like to thank representatives of the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, the Green Party and the Conservative Party, even if they aren't in this chamber, who have raised their voices in support. Why then and how? Other great European cities with similar architectural heritage and tourist considerations have found ways of delivering play spaces and becoming more family-friendly cities. Paris has a play space on almost every corner, benches to sit, for parents to sit on while children play. Oslo has a play space outside the central station. Much closer to home and possibly more relevantly, new retail developments like Westfield and Battersea recognise the value of investing in play spaces. So they baked those into the design from the outset. We believe that investing in a city centre playground would benefit city centre businesses through increased footfall, increased dwell time and therefore increased spend. Now, we know that councillors here are going to present learned arguments about the right to play, and we're going to leave that to them, because my job today is to bring the voices of the petitioners into the chamber so that you can hear your electorate. And of course, petition signatories speak on behalf of the children of Oxford who can't sign petitions and are not on social media. And if they're watching on live stream, they should really be in bed right now, but one of them sent me with a good luck charm. So, Lisa Bedwell from Oxford says, I have 2 boys who love to play and climb, and we would visit Oxford city centre more if there was somewhere they could let off some energy. Sadia Kiran Mahmood from Oxford says, the more dynamic and inclusive our centre is for residents and families, the more will improve our local circulating economy. And Gemma Kirby from somewhere in the UK, clearly a visitor, says, when I visit Oxford, there are very few outdoor options that actually captivate my young kids. I want them to love the city as much as I do. Now, a note on funding. Today isn't about finding the money right now. It's about establishing the principle as something this council wants to do and seeks to find funds for. At Oxplay, we really understand that council funds are finite and there are an infinite number of calls on those funds, and you guys are doing an incredible job working for residents in the city. But we wonder if developer funding or corporate sponsorship might be a way through. Now, during the process of building this petition, we've gathered feedback from residents about what they'd like to see, and in the interest of brevity, we're not going to share it all here. But the strongest thing that came through is that it be accessible for children of all abilities, and we're happy to share all the rest of that feedback if it's helpful. Finally, we're aware that Oxford is undergoing a degree of change right now, so our ask is simply that space for play is baked into ongoing planning and budgeting. We believe all this would be good for families, good for businesses, good for tourists, good for locals, and good for the city. Now, we're also parents, bringing up our children to ask politely. So, in summary, councillors, may we have a playground, please? Thank you for listening.
Thank you for your address. We now proceed to debate the petition. We have a report and a motion before us. We have a maximum of 15 minutes, and I've had 5 requests to speak. That is a proposer and seconder for the report, Councillor Miles and Councillor Kerr and Councillor Jafari Marbini on the motion. If we do that, we will get through this and we will have a decision and a response to our petitioner in 15 minutes. So is that okay? I see no dissent. Can I ask for, I believe it's Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So many of the councillors here have day jobs. Mine is I'm a neuroscientist and I have done some work on brain development. So I think I'm in a particularly good position to know exactly how much the environment around a developing brain affects how a child develops. Those young brains, they're terribly sensitive to the stresses and strains of life around them. They're like a sponge. They soak up what's around them. It's the reason, for example, that Koreans can't hear the difference between p and b. And it's the reason that I, for example, despite having lived 3 years in France, cannot hear the difference between au-dessus and en-dessus. Because those weren't sounds I heard around me when I was 2 years old. So I know that those first few years are really critical for healthy social, emotional, and physical development. Now, living in a city is stressful. Looking after young children is stressful. So just imagine the difference between an outing to the city centre where you're dragged around the shops by a tired parent whose patience wearing thin before you queue for a bus home. And a trip to the city centre where you have a chance to pause, to play with a newfound friend, to climb over some logs, lie on a bench and look at the clouds. You know, just take a few moments to let some joy in. And this is why I think giving opportunities for small children and their caregivers, whether that could be parents, grandparents, step-parents, foster parents, whatever it is, to do this, to de-stress, this could not be more important. We have a lot of great green spaces and playgrounds in the city, from Port Meadow to South Park, places like South Oxfordshire Adventure Playground, Croft Road Rec. But we have very little in the city centre. And I think that needs to change. Yeah. We want families with young children to come into the city centre. We want them to visit the museums. We should be trying to make the busy lives of caregivers just a bit easier by providing some space to sit down and unwind and watch your toddlers toddle around. We aren't going to be able to magic up a site and a budget for this instantly, but we are working with the County Council and other landowners to see what might be possible. So I'd really like to thank the petitioner, Josie, for coming along to speak today, to underline just how we could do more to ensure that our next generation grows up happy and healthy.
Thank you, Councillor Upton. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Munkonge.
I reserve the right to speak later.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
So I think I'm proposing a motion, if that's correct, and thank Louise for her words on the report just now. So I'm proposing that we as a council agree to the principle of a city centre playground, of creating a children's playground here in our city and right in the heart, and in response to the petition that we've heard today. Who wants one? Well, we've heard it. We've heard the residents want them. We know children want them too. Children don't get a vote, but we represent them, and we should really make sure that their views are heard and we meet their needs. Their parents, and I'm a parent of 3 young children, and we know carers also want them. Trying to entertain children in town and find a safe place for them to play. It is getting better, now we've got Broad Street, but it's still difficult. And so having a place where they can let off steam in between running the errands, the school shoe purchasing that we heard in the speech, that would be fantastic. And we also know that visitors to our city want one. It's the last place where you want to go as the centre of a city if you've got young children, because usually they're really unfriendly. But if you go to other European cities where you know that there's that great infrastructure, it doesn't put you off. People go to Copenhagen just because it's family friendly. So why build one? We know, and we've heard also from Louise just now, that there are no children's play areas within a kilometre's walk of the city centre, and that's despite the huge number that we boast of in the city. So we've got great representation in the city, but just not in the middle. We've also got falling numbers of children in the city. 14% of the population is estimated to be aged between 0 and 14. You know, we want to be attracting families to live in Oxford, and addressing the housing crisis, I know, is part of it, but also making sure it's a welcoming place as well. And it'll make, by creating a public open space for children, will be a step for Oxford to become a child-friendly city. The UN Convention on the Rights of the Child sets out the principle that governments respect, protect and fulfil the right to play of all children through legislation, planning and budgets. Now, at the moment, this is kind of planning in terms of a principle in that broad sense, but let's agree to that principle. We also know that the benefits, we've also just heard them in terms of resilience building and addressing health inequalities as well. If we can make public realm improvements to the city centre, we can create that vision to ensure that these play areas make the city centre a more inclusive public place for all children. And there's the commercial benefits we've heard too. Every £1 invested in an adventure playground apparently is deemed to estimate £1.32 in social benefit, but also it can boost commercial trading by investing in public spaces within town centres and generate significant private investment. So it's time to commit now because we're creating this COMP framework, the Central Oxfordshire Movement and Place Framework, which is this strategic vision. So it's going to look at what our vision is for this public realm in the city centre, and it does build on the city centre action plan as well. So we want to put this into our vision now. We don't have the funding, but let's not create the barriers before we even start. Let that framework, that vision, be in place so we can identify the funding when we've decided what we want. So residents today have set out their vision. I'd like to think that all of us in the chamber here today agrees with that vision, and I hope that we will support that motion. You'll all support that motion to endorse that vision that they've presented to us. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. Yes, it's working? Great. I second this motion and ask you to support it because it's a good motion and also because I think it's a great example of grassroots local democracy. We know from the number of people who signed the petition that families would welcome a city centre playground. In a cost of living crisis, it's really hard for young families to find things to do for free with children, and there's especially poor provision in Oxford city centre. You know, I've got 3 young kids. I know firsthand what it's like trying to navigate the city centre. It's possible to do it, but there's very little safe outside space, and this is invaluable if you are shopping with kids. An Oxford playground would benefit residents, visitors and businesses alike. And, you know, it's just nice to have children playing in the city centre. So I'm going to keep it snappy. I urge you to support this motion and develop the next stages of a playground in Oxford city centre.
Councillor Jafari Marbini.
Just speaking about on behalf of residents in Northwood Brook and Blackbird Leys in general, quite a lot of my residents, they don't really tend to come into city centre very much. Families don't tend to come into city centre very much because there isn't actually anywhere that you can walk around, unless you look up events prior and make sure there's a free event that you can go to. There isn't actually anywhere to come in. Dragging children around the West Gate basically involves either saying no constantly to demands of like going into Smiggle and buying more stuff, or just having a really unpleasant experience, or sitting in one of the fairly expensive cafes with young children, which is never that much fun. So it does mean that families don't really tend to come into this town centre, and then when you add the bus fare, or if people want to drive, the kind of obviously quite a lot of traffic, it's not really something that people do that much of, and I really think that needs to be changed, and this might help especially if there are some beautiful designs of, so I used to work and live in Melbourne, and in Melbourne by the Children's Hospital there's a really beautiful playground that's not closed off, and it's actually an integral part of the buildings, and it's all outside, and it's really, really beautiful and lovely, and it's all free. So I would really recommend that we all support this. The other issue I would just mention is that today, myself in the Health Inequalities hat on, and some of the other colleagues here, we were at a Marmot Day to try and become a Marmot County. And one of the things that was talked about was the health inequalities that we see in Oxfordshire. And it's really quite astounding. There's a 15-year life expectancy gap between the wealthiest in the city and the poorest in the city. And unfortunately, there is a town and gown divide. So there are actually gardens, lawns, woods, arboretum. In fact, a college that has a deer park that's home to a herd of deer that have lived there for over 300 years. And it is actually really awful, actually awful is the word, that many people, residents of the city, have never seen inside that deer park. Why is it that the colleges have all this land behind closed garden doors and walls, and once a year we get the Oxford Open weekend, and it's hallelujah, come and see the colleges, but actually, why is it that all of that is closed off to the residents? And that needs to stop. And maybe the fact that the colleges at the university has a local and global lead and talks about this quite a lot, maybe now is the time to ask them to put their money where their mouth is, not only contribute to this, but think about actually using the numerous facilities that they do have to reduce health inequalities and get our families coming to the city centre. Support this motion, please. Thank you.
Councillor Arshad, you've indicated if you'd like to speak, you have 1 minute, I'm afraid.
Children's playground, please vote for it. I definitely would say this is the most welcomed. It's one of the things when I first became a councillor that I noticed that this is something that I would love to have for the children of Oxford and those who are also coming into the city. But moreover than anything, I think in today's world, with the mental health crisis increasing, especially in the cost of living crisis, this would be amazing for children from all of Oxfordshire to come into the city, and somewhere like you mentioned, and other members in the room who said that it will be a place to unwind and really enjoy it rather than making it more commercial. So I think this would be really, I would really look forward to working on this with others.
And last but not least, Councillor Munkonge.
Thank you so much. Actually, when this came before us, we were just debating who should actually propose this motion, but I acknowledge Councillor Lewis Upton has been doing a lot of work on this. The motion proposed by Councillor Miles and Carr is entirely consistent with the report, if you read our report. And we are delighted that these motions align so closely with what we are already doing. I must emphasize and remind members the great investment that we do in our play areas, children play areas. We are doing a lot as a council. For example, the children splash park. So we are doing great here in the city. So I will come and will support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It looks like there's an outbreak of consensus, but let us test that by taking a vote on the motion. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. I've been advised that we also need to take a vote on the report that was laid by Councillor Upton, into which the motion has now been incorporated as the last item. Can I see all those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you. Good. We now move on to the last item, which is motions on notice. We have an hour, and I understand that there's been a flurry of acceptances of amendments. Group leaders have expressed an aspiration that we get through 3 motions, and if we are disciplined, we may well just do that. So we move to motion A, and can I just clarify before I ask the proposer to speak whether or not the amendments have been accepted? They have. Thank you, Jonathan. So we have motion A proposed by Councillor Morris.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. Sorry, just for clarity, the exact text of the amendments have not been accepted, but a variation of them has been, and it would be useful for that to be... apparently has been circulated, but not to me. So members would be wise to read whatever has been circulated.
Yeah. Thank you. And
a sheet of A4 like this.
Yeah, I understand, and we'll take it, unless I hear any objection, that has been accepted by the councillors proposing the 2 amendments. Yes? Good. Okay. So, motion A, making Oxford a truly walkable city. Councillor Morris to propose.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. To some people, walking might seem like an uninspiring, trivial, or, if you'll forgive my pun, pedestrian topic. But from our perspective, walkability is a critical problem of social justice, equity, and inclusion. As this motion notes, disabled people, people of colour, older people, younger people, women and children are much more likely to depend on walking. This motion also notes that Oxford was recently named the most walkable city in the UK, ahead of Brighton, York, Bristol and London, especially for visitors to the world-renowned tourist attractions and heritage sites that surround us in this place. But there is much more that we can and should be doing as a city council to improve the walkability of Oxford streets for all residents and visitors in all parts of our city. Not only is regular walking good for physical and mental health, but it boosts social connectivity. It's a way to explore the built and natural environments around us, building closer communities and improving public health. As an Oxford resident who doesn't own a car or bike, I walk absolutely everywhere for fun and relaxation, to connect with nature, to get to work and to get to council meetings. But as someone with hidden disabilities, such as type 1 diabetes, walking also helps to regulate my blood sugar levels and mood. But it can also come with unexpected difficulties, such as sudden fatigue and severe dehydration. One way to help people like me is through strategic investment to improve public infrastructure, including but not limited to benches, which provide spaces for rest, relaxation, and recuperation, public toilets, which provide essential utilities for comfort and hygiene, better signage, which allows for walkers to find their way more easily, water fountains to prevent dehydration and overheating, street trees to provide shelter from the sun, wind, and rain. On this last point, I think it's vital that we remember extreme weather events will become more frequent and intense as the climate emergency worsens. Importantly, making pavements more accessible for disabled people has the brilliant effect of improving quality of life for everyone, but especially those who rely on walking. This motion helps by developing a long-term, coordinated strategy for walkability. For example, by designing a plan for improving walking and creating a walkable map of Oxford, we would be able to plan for the future by identifying areas that need greater investment, making Oxford streets more accessible and creating a world-leading walkable city. We've heard from 2 fantastic public addresses in this chamber in support of this motion. First from Sushila Dal, Chair of the Oxford Pedestrians Association, and then secondly from Margaret Simpson, today Chair of the Oxford 50+ Network. But there are many other community groups that are interested in supporting us to deliver these goals. Having worked closely with these groups, I'm really proud to propose this motion in my first substantive speech to this chamber. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconder is Councillor Kerr. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right?
I'll speak now, please. So I echo everything my colleague has said in her speech, and I'd just like to briefly also thank members from Labour and the IOA for their constructive contributions and amendments to this motion. We know that there are many things which hugely impact the pedestrian experience, and Oxford City does not control all of them. We need to rely on the Transport Minister to release the 2020 pavement parking consultation, which was disgracefully delayed by the Tories for literally years. The County Council will be responsible for designing and adopting a curbside strategy, a vital component of this, as well as safe crossings, hedge cutting, and ensuring that different street lighting needs are recognised in urban and rural areas. This council can, however, make significant changes on its own. A proper Oxford City walking strategy would prove transformative, really ensuring that we understand the barriers and benefits and potentially attracting inward investment. As the planning authority, we could ensure Dutch-style entry curbs to new residential drop curb conversions. This basically involves adding a simple sloped stone curb, which prevents the wibbly-wobbly pavements, which negatively impact hundreds of people walking and wheeling every day, and yet it would leave the one or two car movements across the pavement just as easy to navigate. This works in other countries. A walkable map of Oxford is likely to be welcomed by tourists. Successes in London and other places have shown this, and they've often been funded by rail authorities. I was involved in creating a crowdsourced pedestrian map of Oxford last year. We've had 30,000 views, but like a more official map printed and handed out to everyone at rail stations could be even more popular. And probably would be. You know, there's also other areas of City Council responsibility or joint responsibility which the strategy might look at and prioritise, such as new benches, water fountains, public toilets, etc. There's also some other innovative walking ideas which we can learn from other LAs. I'm a really big fan of the Bicester Blue Lines. I don't know if you guys know about this. It's 3 different 5-kilometre long blue circular lines which run through the city. People use them to meet up for health walks and to learn more about their cities. They're a really simple health intervention which has had a huge impact, and I'm sure there's many other things. In conclusion, we know Oxford is walkable relative to many places, and we know how important walking is for the health and well-being of so many residents and visitors to our fabulous city. I urge you to vote for this motion, which should help improve walking and wheeling for all who visit.
Are there any other councillors who wish to speak on the motion? I see Councillor Miles. Councillor Miles.
Thank you. Pavements were designed for people, not cars, but too often in our city, the very people and often the most vulnerable are forced to use the road, not the pavement, as they circumnavigate the parked cars, vans and lorries that block their path. For a little bit of convenience and free parking, inconsiderate people popping in for a coffee or enjoying a drink in a pavement cafe, which we often, are ones that we're licensing, are showing disregard for the rules and disrespect for others. Children of all ages, people in wheelchairs, parents with prams containing newborn babies or toddlers, the visually impaired, older people, all of these others, pavement parking is putting them at risk. Now, I know that we don't control that, but as Councillor Keir has just mentioned, we can put pressure on the government to start addressing that. But it's not just the things that others are doing that are causing problems for the people to navigate our city by foot or wheelchair. It's the things that we as a council do and under our control or influence. I mentioned pavement licensing, where people are parking in front of a cafe and blocking the pavement so that they can enjoy their coffee conveniently. Well, we need to stop that happening so that people can use the pavement to walk on. As a council, we request people leave their wheelie bins on the pavement for collection. And as we contend with an increasing number of HMOs, the family homes with just 1 bin are often in the minority. Maybe a household will have 2 to 3 bins as they've expanded if they're HMO. People put them out at the beginning of the day before they go to work or to study, and these bins are only removed from the pavement at the end of the day. This means bin day is often an obstacle course day for people walking through our residential neighbourhoods. Imagine if you're blind. Imagine what happens if you are in a wheelchair. Again, you're forced into the road, even if you're walking, and you otherwise have to squeeze past bins, and that's sometimes not possible if cars are parked halfway across the pavement in some of our controlled parking zones. So the poor provision of drop curbs, which we've heard, makes it difficult to lift a buggy on and off a pavement. It's even more difficult if you're in a wheelchair. I want to share that a resident with Parkinson's in a wheelchair was toppled over into the road trying to navigate the lack of a drop curb in our city. So they're clear policy gaps where we need to address or challenges, some of which are in our control and some not, but we still need a coordinated plan to address these challenges. And I urge you to support this motion because I think our curbside strategy will help. Thank you.
Councillor Artino.
Yes, thank you for incorporating our amendments into this motion. I was listening to Councillor Morris saying that Oxford has been, do you say, declared as one of the most walkable cities? I think if I said that to some of the residents of my ward in Northfield Brook, and probably some of the other members here said that to residents of their wards on the outskirts of a city and estates, they might get laughed at. And I think perhaps there's a huge inequality in the experience of walking for many of our residents. And I think that is largely down to some of the policies of the County Council, which are the whole point of our amendment, and quite a lot of them are down to County Councillor Peter Sudbury and his inflexibility in some of the policies that he's implemented. Street lighting. Myself, Councillor Jabari Mafini, Councillor Imadi Edison One, Councillor Smith and Councillor Arshad have repeatedly taken up the call from residents for lighting on paths in Gillians Park, which is the quickest way for the majority of our residents to get from Greater Lees to Blackburn Lees, none about to anywhere else. And some of those paths are lit by County Council lights, but some of them are not. And the County Council are just being inflexible about coming to an arrangement to make that safe. So safety, we've got to get the basics right, and safety is one of those. The idea from Councillor Peter Sudbury to turn off all our lights at some point early in the evening is just absolutely absurd. I don't think he has any concept of what it's like to live and work in a city. Many of our residents are working at night. Many of us represent people who will have to walk across bridges, across the ring road or under subways to get anywhere in the city. It's frankly an absurd idea, so I hope you'll join us in condemning Peter Sudbury's ideas on that matter. Likewise, the inflexibility around cutting of hedges. At St John Fisher School, which is a primary school on Sandy Lane West, quite a busy road, especially in the mornings. The head teacher repeatedly wrote to Councillor Sudbury, Councillor Jafari Mabini, myself, Councillor Tricia Elphinstone, and Councillor Imadi Edison repeatedly wrote to him to say, we're not encouraging walking, we're making it unsafe for our parents to walk to school, we're actually encouraging them to go by car because the hedge is overgrowing the pavement so much it's literally forcing people into the road. And it's only to the point where we're literally saying if you don't do something now, we're going to the Oxford Mill, that we eventually got that cut back. Likewise, in Blackbird Lees Road, which is one of the only two ways to get off Blackbird Lees towards Cowley, the hedges were left to overgrow the footpath to such an extent that pedestrians had no choice but to walk in a cycle path, which is on quite a slope downhill and is dangerous. So there needs to be, Councillor Peter Sudbury needs to look at some of these policies that he's trying to implement and get some flexibility that they are not working, the city is not the countryside. He needs to look at this in detail and be flexible and make changes. Likewise with our verge cutting, it's not just verge cutting, it's highways maintained at public expense land. Much of both Blackburn Lees Ward and Northfield Brook Ward has got large areas of green space which were designed as somebody described it once, as a series of village greens, play areas. They are now left, because of the County Council Peter Sudbury's policies, to be only cut once a year to become overgrown by nettles. They deter people from walking. I met a...
could you wind up, please, Councillor?
Well, I met an elderly resident recently who could barely get out of her gate of her property to the pathway. It was so overgrown and nettles. So we need to get the basics right, and it's the County Council that needs to take responsibility for that. It's safety and accessibility, it's street lighting, it's verge cutting, and it's keeping hedges off pathways. And it's the County Council, and in particular, is often Peter Sudbury who needs to make some changes.
Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Didn't hear you over the applause. Apologies. I'll be very brief after that contribution, which I very much agreed with. I wanted to focus a little bit on safety and also some of the other issues that Councillor Tino was referencing in terms of equality. I mean, first of all, I want to say it is fantastic that Oxford is considered one of the most, or the most, walkable city in the country. That is really good news for people, and it's obviously good that we can, many people in our city are able to do that, and that so many people use walking as their means to get to their workplace. But I absolutely also recognise the descriptions that Councillor Tino mentioned in terms of some pavements not being so accessible. But I also just particularly wanted to focus on street lighting and safety. Because I think if we are realistic about walking, and I'm someone who's quite confident and walks everywhere in our city, including at night, and feels quite confident in doing so, but many women in particular do not feel confident walking, particularly when it's dark. And so it is incredibly important that we do recognise that, and that we do make sure that we have adequate street lighting throughout the night, because in a city in particular, you will find that there are many people doing night shifts and who work antisocial hours. And it's no use shaking your head at me, Councillor Fowler. It is true. I work in a hospital, and in a hospital, people work different shifts. There are other people in the city who work different shifts as well. And frankly, even if they are getting some other method of transport, there is a likelihood that at some point they are going to be having to walk home. The one thing I found particularly egregious about the proposals coming from Councillor Sudbury was the fact that in those proposals it was suggested that there was no equality impact at all, and that is just so untrue. And I think it is really important that we recognise that, in particular, women and girls, and in particular ethnic minority communities, will be badly impacted in our city by proposals to remove street lighting overnight. So I know it's a bit of a tangential aspect to this, but it is really important, because if we want people to walk, they have to feel safe. So I will leave it there. But I think we have made the point that street lighting is also vital to a safe approach to walking in our city.
Councillor Rahman.
Yeah, thank you. So we noted in the opening statements that we're already number one, but as a walkable city. So going forward, you know, the way that everything else was described, it would be that we were like in a disaster. Some of these projects and county and the city contradict each other. So we're already number one, as you stated in your programme. But it just seems to me just another attack on different groups. So I've got a large family, actually, and I need more than one green bin, just for your information. And I don't live in a HMO, and I'm a car driver, but it just seemed, instead of trying to join everybody to have a walking city, it's again about certain group in certain areas. As pointed out by some councillors, there's real difficulties in estates like Wood Farm, Blackbellies, Littlemore, which this doesn't apply to. You know, this walkable city, this is everything we're talking about East Oxford, North Oxford, city centre. That's the implication here. It's all about inequality. So we are the number one walkable city, so I don't support this motion because we're already there. We need to improve other stuff. So if we can sort out the street lighting, if we can sort out public transport and give people a real choice, and you know what, when people do feel comfortable to walk 24 hours a day all the time, they will walk. And it's good that we're number one. We're doing lots of work, but don't attack one group for another, because it's everybody's city and it should be walkable and friendly for all types of transport, walkable or not.
Councillor Malik.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I just follow up. I mean, when I read this motion coming from the Green Party, I mean, they are the partner currently in the county council, and the most responsibility lies, first of all, if you want to encourage people to walk, they need to sort the pavements out. If you walk along the pavements and have a look, which I do and look, how many people trips and how uneven they are. And look at the state of our beautiful Queen Street in the city center. You know, you go the patches of tarmacs everywhere. I mean, people can say anything, but Green and Liberal are running the county council. I am slightly baffled. We are majority. And I don't think so. Maybe some people born in this city and been living longer. I've been living here 35 years. And are you surprised Oxford is the most walkable city? When you have 30-odd colleges, beautiful buildings next to each other. Who wants a taxi from Queen's College to going into University College? Of course they're going to walk. So when the people get off St. Giles and you go to Parks Road, all the stuff is there. Unless you have a mobility issue, you're going to walk. So I'm not surprised Oxford is the most walkable city have been done, because that's the way our city has set. Such a congested area where everything is there. Anybody who I pick up in my taxi, they're about Oxford, I say, well, you need a comfortable shoe and strong pair of legs to explore our city, because everything is next to each other. And equally, I echo what Councillor Ejaz said, when we have to basically kill the inequality in the city, you know, north and east divide, everything being step out on the east side of the city, and all the private schools and everything. There's no LTN in Summertown and Mr. Gant's para yard and everything, and it's inflict everything on the East Oxford and the working class. So it is a war on a working class in a nutshell. But where far the motion is concerned, I think this should have gone to the county council. They can release the fund. They got the powers. Let's have the payment safe first for the working people, and then come back to us and ask us something to do. I don't think so we're going to achieve that, so I'm going to vote against this motion.
Okay, we have, I have Councillors Railton, Smoten, Clarkson, Stairs, Ross Smith and Jarvis, and anyone else who wants to speak. Councillor Henwood, Councillor Upton and Councillor Powell, and I propose that we draw a line under it there. Okay, Councillor Railton.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. So I have 3 minutes prepared on Dutch curbs, so I hope you are all up for that. And I love the fact that you think I'm joking. Not joking. Yeah, I have a neighbour who I'm friends with. She is in her 90s, and she's taught me many things. But one of the sort of see the world in a slightly different way ones was when she talked about the camber of pavements. She walks around our neighbourhood with a walker, you know, one of the wheeled ones. We both live within walking distance of the big Sainsbury's on the Ring Road, and one day a few years ago she mentioned to me how difficult it was to walk there, which I was surprised to hear. The reason for this wasn't particularly broken up pavements as I thought, although there are bits where this is true. It was in fact camber. So, you know, anybody who has pushed a buggy around, or a wheelchair, or rides a mobility scooter, or indeed rides a cargo bike with more than 2 wheels, basically like anything with wheels like this, rather than this, knows that camber is like absolutely the enemy. Pushing or riding something with wheels like this on a surface with camber is destabilizing. And what you have in pavements in the UK is dropped curbs literally everywhere. Dropped curbs is an absolutely fake news name, for what they are. They're actually dropped pavements, really. So, you know, what you have is pavement that is not flat, but cambered into the road every few metres for nearly every driveway on most pavements in this entire country. You know, this was the bit that I've never really been quite able to unsee. For the sake of literally a couple of car movements a day, up a driveway being that little bit smoother, we've made life just a little bit worse for every pedestrian who uses the pavement, and that is genuinely wild. It's also the world we continue to build for ourselves over and over again. You know, every dropped curve application, every new development does this. Every single one of them is a tiny paper cut for pedestrians, which we all are at some point, and a reminder of how car-centric a lot of our urban design is. The solution to this is, of course, the humble Dutch curb. Instead of entirely sloping the entire pavement downwards, you keep it flat and you install a slightly wider curb with a 45-degree cut in it. I'm genuinely not sure why we don't do this. It seems cheaper to do than what we currently do because you don't have to reprofile the entire pavement. The way I organise my to-do list and my entire life is with a large amount of post-it notes on a door in my office, which you can see in the Zoom background, so if you have a look. There is a section on there entitled Things to be Annoying About, and Dutch Curbs has languished on there for a few years now. So I'm very thankful to be able to talk about them today, as I am also grateful to Pat for inadvertently teaching me about car-centric pavement design, and that healthy quality of life and mobility in old age is something that has to be fought for, even if the world we build around us fights against that. So, yay for Dutch Curbs. I support the motion.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I will support this motion by the tiniest fraction, and that is because it is a great original motion. Wholly endorse the warm words that Councillor Miles contributed earlier, and thanks to the proposers for putting together an excellent motion. I think there are significant problems that are introduced by the Labour amendment, and credit actually to the proposers for negotiating the corners off that to the point that it is just supportable. There are two really key problems that are introduced, I think, which ought to be clearly flagged. First of all is this business about street lighting. This is basically fear, uncertainty, and doubt. This is a matter which has been well handled at the decisions meeting, and the attempts are being made here to reopen the issue and to stir the pot. I and many other councillors wrote to Councillor Sudbury about that topic. We spoke at the decisions meeting to express that an 11 p.m. switch off is not the right thing for Oxford. And Councillor Sudbury responded very, very constructively to that. He said in the meeting, and I quote, "The only time you turn off lights is when no one's using them. We had no intention to go anywhere near Oxford, ellipsis. It's too complex. There are lots of people active almost all of the time." That is quite right, but what we're hearing in this council chamber is as if those words hadn't been spoken. The paper was taken off the table, quite rightly so. The amendment that was put by Labour also didn't just ask for Oxford's lights to stay on, which is our business. It asked for the county to abandon the policy county-wide, even for tiny hamlets, where blazing light into the small hours may well be pure waste and may well have the backing of local residents that there should be part-night lighting in that place. That would burn £400,000 of public money every year. We wouldn't accept that in our council. We shouldn't be asking it of other councils. Secondly, I note, and this is very much more minor, that we are once again reopening this question of grass cutting, hedge cutting, and so on, and trying to get another council to bear the cost. And as the authors must surely know, both this authority and the county have very, very tight budget constraints, and it doesn't look as if there's a lot of hope that we're going to get a reprieve from a new Labour government. Are we asking the county to pull money out of social care for old folks? Are we asking them to fund one less child with special educational needs? Labour has a county group. If they want to up spending on those things, that county group should put a principal budget amendment that says exactly what it is that they want to defund, rather than just get the city group to write them a letter. Finally, we've got this business about crossings and 40-mile-an-hour roads and bus stops. That sounds very laudable. It's also infuriatingly vague in that it seems like it must be referring to one precise road. I cannot for the life of me work out exactly what's being got at there. I wish that had been just a letter to the cabinet member involved rather than going into a motion. Relatively harmless, though. With all that being said, as I say, the proposers have successfully negotiated on the matters. They've knocked the more objectionable corners off the amendment. They've got it to the point of being just about supportable. So, thank you very much to the proposers for the original motion, and I shall be supporting it today.
Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, I support this motion very much. Some of my earliest memories of visiting Oxford as a child were walking into Oxford from my grandparents' house on Iffley Road, from Iffley Lock to Folly Bridge with my father and siblings. So yes, it's one of the loveliest walks in Oxford. What I'd like to say is this isn't in the motion, but something that we should bear in mind and keep putting pressure on Trent Thames Valley Police about and the county is the scourge of e-bikes and e-scooters, which cause massive problems. Increasingly, they're just blocking pavements. I've got a doctor who is sight impaired and uses a wheelchair in my ward. She struggles to get to work, to the John Radcliffe Hospital every day from her home in Marston because people thoughtlessly dump these bikes. This is becoming a bigger problem day by day, and if we are to encourage more people to walk, then that's something that we must really put the pressure on both the county and Thames Valley Police. Thank you.
Councillor Stairs.
Thank you. And whilst I approve the sentiment of the motion, I do have concerns. One of the biggest key issues for pedestrians, particularly in the city centre, is the danger posed by bicycles, e-bikes and scooters. You only have to stand outside M&S for a few minutes to see what's played out. The elderly, vulnerable and those with young children from my ward express reluctance to come into the city centre for this sole reason. We need to improve this and make walking feel safer in our city. Thank you.
Councillor Rod Smith.
Can I stand? Because is that all right? I just find it easier to fit in. I'm looking forward to some changes with our new Labour government. I'm looking forward to some changes with regard to policy and rules, national rules, with regard to tactile pavement, which was mentioned, I think, earlier. People find it wibbly-wobbly. Having been a county councillor for some time and able to, and a city councillor now too for some time, it has been good to be able to request and then actually fund dropped curbs to go in. What's been frustrating is that they've had to be with tactile paving as well, because that is what the national policy is. Perhaps this new Labour government will change that. I'd like to see it, to see a smoother crossing where possible. So that I welcome. The thing about the street lighting, in fact, actually, both as my colleague Chris has mentioned, and myself raised it immediately when we saw this officer's report. And I was very pleased to get this response, actually, from Councillor Pete Sudbury. I deferred, rejected the paper because it was badly worded and didn't fit my views about the need for flexible timing to suit the different places people live and their work and life patterns. Part night lighting works if the lights are on when people are out and about and off when they aren't. It didn't make clear Oxford and large towns were excluded from the initial plan phase and that we pilot first and would consult and implement settlement by settlement. Please take that response that he made to me in mid-November as his reason for pulling that thing. Now, this particular policy, I can remember, with my county council hat on, if that's all right, being first discussed with the whole political range at county some time ago, and actually was supported by some of your Labour county council colleagues. So please remember that. That is fine, but please remember that this policy was written by an officer, not by the councillor that has been mentioned.
Can we let Councillor Smith speak, please?
Thank you. I didn't shout out while other people were speaking, and I find it quite disrespectful that people do that when I'm trying to make a point. So I welcome this motion and will support it. I hope that the tactile pavement in rules will be considered and changed, possibly. Although they are there for a reason. They are there for those who have poor sight. So we have to remember that as well, too, if we're going to make a truly inclusive walking city, which is what I'd like to see. So thank you for bringing the motion, and I will be supporting it.
Councillor Jarvis.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Occasionally, when we have debates in this chamber, I find some things that people say quite peculiar. And I'm not talking about Councillor Smoten giving the ringing endorsement of this motion as just about supportable, which I quite enjoyed. No, I'm more thinking about the description of the production of walking maps, the introduction of benches and investment infrastructure as, quote unquote, a war on the working class, which is, I think, what we heard earlier. I find that quite bizarre. but to respond to some of the more specific criticisms that were levelled against this motion by people who've said they intend to vote against it, concerns were raised about, needing to have improvements to pavements if we're going to deliver walkability, improvements to public transport, and so on. These are all things that I think are good things, and I think that I would envisage them all to be covered in a plan for improving walking in Oxford, which is what the motion calls for, and indeed in investing in infrastructure. So hopefully those things would be addressed in that. The other criticism that's levelled about this seemed to be a suggestion that this motion wouldn't address, the things this motion calls for wouldn't address inequality. And I find that quite difficult, because for me, improving walkability, improving active travel, improving the ability for people to get around is fundamentally about equality and tackling and addressing inequity in our city and our society. It's about addressing health inequality, because the more people move around through active travel rather than through other means, there are obvious health benefits there. It obviously improves economic. It helps tackle economic inequality, because if people are able to get around more easily through means which don't require them to pay, that helps as well. And it's really importantly about issues around, for example, disability inequality. If you can leave your house knowing that you will have access to a toilet, or knowing that you'll have access to somewhere to sit down, or access to a water fountain, or access to other facilities and infrastructure, you're much more likely to leave your house and get around. And for me, that is fundamentally an equalities issue. And so I think at the heart of this is attempts to recognise the importance that the experience of people walking and wheeling and getting around in an active way is fundamentally about addressing inequalities. I just wanted to make sure that people were aware of that.
Councillor Henwood.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Councillor Morris and Councillor Kerr, thank you very much for bringing this motion forward and accepting the IOA amendments. It's not a criticism of the motion, but I would like to just add that the visually impaired do use curbs to get around. But that shouldn't be a failure of this Dutch curve system. I can see it being mitigated by using different textures and different colours, and I'm sure that can be resolved that way. I do accept the concerns that a lot of people have voiced this evening about e-bikes on pavements. I do think we need to make more effort to make these safer for our pedestrians. But thank you again for bringing forward this motion. I will be supporting it.
Councillor Upton.
Thank you. Lots of people have actually just mentioned it, but it is the point about the hire scooters and the hire bikes. We do need to get them off the pavements. Now, I know the county is auditing their criteria for the parking spots for these hire bikes, so I'd just like us to add one more thing to that long letter we are writing to the county about verges and street lighting, etc., and ask them to really get on street parking for these, get them off the pavements and get them onto properly marked bays on the street.
Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I hadn't planned to speak in this debate, but as someone who relies exclusively on walking to get around, I felt, based on the discussion, that I wanted to go back to the benefits of the motion, because I'm a little bit concerned that we've sort of got caught up in talking about actions taken by the County Council and forgotten the many things that we as a council can do in regard to this motion. For example, the creation of a walking plan gives us an opportunity to have proper input into the infrastructure in our city. We, as the voice of Oxford City, have a powerful voice to influence the national debate, and I think particularly important here is calling on the government to release the pavement parking paper. We in this city see a massive issue of residents being unable to navigate the streets because there are cars on those streets that were meant for people. And I think we really, really don't want to lose sight of the fact in sort of the discussions around, say, street lighting, which I agree, Oxford is different to the county, that there are things that this city can be doing to make life more, let's say, make life more equitable for our residents. Because at the end of the day, walking is a frontline social justice issue. It matters that residents in my ward who are in, say, a wheelchair cannot navigate the streets of Cowley Road on bin day because bins occupy sort of areas that don't leave enough room for them to get through. And unless we can sort of speak with one voice, then we we sort of lose something. So I hope we can speak with one voice today. We can vote for this motion. That does communicate points to the county on street lighting, with which, as I've said, I agree. But more fundamentally, it sets out that we are a city that wants to represent our residents and wants to ensure that Oxford is a safe and walkable environment for everyone. And I think fundamentally it is an equality point. This makes the case for equality. It doesn't undermine it, as was suggested earlier in the debate. This is a social justice issue. Please vote for this motion.
Councillor Jafari Marbini.
Thank you, councillors, for bringing it. We will be supporting it in its amended form. I think there are two things that we keep forgetting. So I do think that the framing of things is really important. And in my ward in Northfield Brook, actually, even the bus stops often don't have benches to sit on. There is nowhere to sit. The hedges, Simon has spoken at length about this. We are spending hours. Actually, it's also a statutory duty of the county council as the transport authority to maintain those hedges. But there's actually this agreement, and we cannot get accountability as to who owns which hedge and which verge and whose responsibility it is to maintain it. And I don't think it's about a case of asking for, money taken away from SEND. It's actually a duty that they have to make sure that the hedges are cut back so that people can walk safely. In my line, I do also think another just frustration, I guess, that I do have, and this is why I think Sarge's point about the war on the working class, because sometimes things are done in a way and phrased in a way that feels like certain groups are being targeted, and I think that is important, and it's important to recognise and important to accept. And secondly, I say this in the hospital quite a lot as well. We do some really amazing things in Oxford, like, womb transplants, for example, I'm sure you've all heard about, but we actually do not as well on the ABC. My job as an anaesthetist is all about the ABC. You've got to do the basics right, and clearing up the roads, making sure there's somewhere to sit, making sure that the pavements are suitable to be used. Those are the basics, and I really think we're not getting those right in the first of all, and some of that is actually the statutory duty of the county council. And it seems to me that officers within county, unfortunately, I'm not blaming the officers, there's obviously systemic issues at play. It's not clear whose responsibility it is, and that cannot go on, and that needs addressing. This is why it's gone to the discussion around county, because that's part of the basics that we're talking about in order to be able to get people to walk around. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Councillor Chapman.
Well, thank you very much, particularly to the previous speaker who put it very well, I think. If we're going to discuss these issues, we've got to come clean about where responsibility lies. And actually, many of the issues we've heard about tonight, which deter people from walking around the city, do fall fairly and squarely in the county council's responsibility. And there's no denying that. And the county council is currently run in a Green Liberal Democrat coalition, where I would like to see greater emphasis, frankly, upon some of the bread and butter basics, the ABCs, that we heard about in the last speech. And as somebody personally who has suffered in the last few years from a disabling virus, which meant my balance has been affected, you try walking around this city on pavements where the cambers are as they are, and at one point having to have a mobility scooter where, getting around up and down curbs was frankly pretty well impossible. So rather than chasing some of the more harebrained things that the county likes to do, it might like to basically get back and do some of the bread and butter things and do them better and spend some more money on pavements and road maintenance, which is not the City Council's responsibility. It's not our statutory responsibility to do it. We do our very best to supplement that money sometimes, but it basically sits on the county's books to do that. Secondly, I wasn't going to speak until I heard Councillor Smoten talk about verges, which is a subject close to my heart. I just think this chamber needs to remember the verges issue came about because the county council unilaterally cut the funding for verge cutting in this city. There was very little consultation. They dressed it up as a biodiversity argument. When we then went and assessed whether the verges were actually gaining any biodiversity gain, we found there were 7 in the whole city which met that criteria, and we were happy then to carry on with that policy. But the vast majority were not. All that was happening was the grass was growing long, people couldn't see cars, there were safety issues, and people felt the public realm was being neglected. And I think we've got to call a spade here. That was a terrible decision, and it's a decision that we, as a City Council, are going to have to do something about, because the County Council will not put its hand in its pocket and fund those extra cuts. So let's just get the history right here. That was a poor decision which damaged people's confidence in a livable, walkable city. It damaged their confidence in moving around safely in this city, and I think that needs to be acknowledged in this chamber and not disguised with some of the sophistry that we heard from the opposite side. Thank you.
Councillor Ligo.
Very quickly, again, support the motion. Enjoyed the councillors' comments, especially when we talk about walking maps. So we have one in the ward that I represent for Wood Farm, and we had one for several years now in Marston. I just want to go back to the street lights. We all know the importance of the reasons stated, the safety reasons, but I just want to put it out there. The policy paper, okay, was pulled, and we know that, until after the county council elections, because they knew the backlash they received from residents and the charity sector and women groups. That is a fact. That policy paper, which Councillor Ross Smith referred to when she said there were Labour cabinet members on there, yes, I was on there, and one of the things I asked for at the time as well, the paper wasn't happy with it, and I wouldn't agree with the policy paper, which I've done on other policies where I haven't taken collective responsibility, was the simple fact that I wanted to make sure there was consultation, workshops, face-to-face with the charity and voluntary organisations, and that's what I wanted to happen. And then suddenly it just appeared in a single member delegated decision, and that paper would have been discussed at a pre-cabinet meeting, so all the cabinet members there would have been responsible to have seen that and made comment and knew it was coming. And the other thing on this as well is that, again, same again about safer streets, talking about e-bike scooters. So I've had several walkabouts with county officers, and we had 2 3-hour walkabouts, one in Northway, one in Marston. And we took several photographs, looked at various locations. Again, I'm still pushing for over half of them to be removed. There was lack of consultation and asking for a lot of those to be used for safety grounds as well. So it's been a real issue, not just in the wards that I represent in Marston, Northway or the church wards, but generally across the city. And there's been lack of consultation, also working with councillors about where they're positioned within the city as well. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you.
And last but not least, Councillor Arshad.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I just wanted to remind members and Lord Mayor that today is International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. It marks the start of 16 days of activism to end gender-based violence. I believe that our public confidence in our shared spaces is vital. And obviously, if we're going to carry on this debate, I want everyone to know the national statistics data for 2021 census illustrates that 1 in 2 women feel unsafe walking alone after dark in quiet streets near their home, compared to 1 in 7 men. Lord Mayor, 1 in 2 women feel unsafe walking alone after dark in a busy public place, compared to 1 in 5 men. This means that the amendment proposed by Councillor Simon Ottino, where it's saying that residents are deterred from walking at night, and inadequate street lighting is very important to us. This is relevant to the motion on this motion, and I just want you guys to hear me out. So 4 out of 5 women feel unsafe walking alone after dark in a park. Even if you go in St. Clement's ward, the ward I live in, when you go out in the dark, from distance from one lamppost to the other, in the winter period, it gets really dark and it feels unsafe. And therefore, I think that you guys need to consider that as well. And that's not including the people who are disabled and those who are blind and partially blind. And, you know, so, yeah, I think feelings of vulnerability need to also be taken in account of, because we are living in high levels of deprivation, and this council urged the county council, and we had to put a petition up, you know, to go to that length for the council to hear us. And yeah, that's all I'm going to say for now, but I think it's very particularly concerning for women and young girls. Even though some women may feel safe, there's a lot of women, especially from BME backgrounds and of all races, who feel uncomfortable walking in the dark.
That is the end of the debate, so I return to Councillor Morris to sum up.
Thank you, everyone, for that incredibly constructive debate and discussion. I was keeping notes of what every councillor said, but honestly, there was too much for me to respond to each individual point. So I've just highlighted what I think are some key themes and hopefully some responses that might provide reassurance, particularly to those councillors who are thinking to vote against the motion. The first thing I want to remind everyone is that before we had this debate, we heard a debate based on a petition for a playground to be built in the city centre, and there was unanimity in this chamber in voting in favour of that. And I don't think that the substance of this motion differs substantially from that proposal. So I would ask you just to consider whether there's consistency in the way that you voted this evening. In particular, we focused on disabled people. That's partly due to my experiences and interests, but also older people and women and others who might feel vulnerable in particular contexts as well. But there's one group that we haven't discussed, and that's children. Of all of those groups, children are the ones who are most reliant upon walking because they cannot travel by other means. So I would like you to keep all of the different groups for whom this would be a benefit to in mind when casting your votes. I would like to thank councillors for raising the fact that there might have been a bit of confusion about how I presented the motion, noting that we had been ranked the most walkable city, but I was actually critical of that because it was focusing only on the city centre. This motion is not just about East Oxford, North Oxford, Central Oxford, it's about the whole city. And again, I don't think we should be framing it in terms of pitting particular groups against one another. This is for everybody. And as I tried to emphasise, when we make our city more inclusive and accessible for minority groups, including disabled people, we actually improve things for everybody. There's been lots of debate around the county council and street lighting and hedges and verges. Again, I want to highlight that we have been very receptive to constructive amendments from other parties, hoping that we can find consensus on what we can do as a city council. And that might include taking a different view from our colleagues in the county council on some issues. But I'd also like to thank councillors for their clarifications around those issues too. I also just want to give a shout out to Councillor Barbara Coyne, who unfortunately can't be here today, but who has been helping with this motion behind the scenes. And she obviously takes a leading role in the Safer Pavements Oxford campaign. So I take very seriously concerns around safety, particularly for women and for night workers. And I think those are helpful discussions that we can have as well. And also, I think lastly, lots of people have mentioned the bikes and e-scooters issue. And again, this is something that's come up in my discussions with community groups when thinking about this motion. And I think one of the real issues with the e-bikes and e-scooters problem is that we're giving up public space on our pavements to private companies. This motion calls for us to invest in public infrastructure on pavements. So if we're going to be critical of those uses of pavement space, I would urge you to support this motion because it sets a clear direction, a different direction for how we use our public spaces for all residents and for all members of our community. So thank you all so much for your thoughts, and I urge you to vote for the motion.
Thank you, members of council. We will now take a vote on the main motion, incorporating the amendment that has been agreed between the three groups. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Thank you. And any abstentions? Thank you. The motion carries. In theory, we have, in theory, 4 minutes left of the motions. Would members of council be happy for us to extend the time until 9 o'clock so that we can... No, I'm seeing... Sorry, I am seeing shaking of heads here. May I suggest that we take an indicative vote? Who would like to extend standing orders for 15 minutes? All those in favour? How many? And all those against? So that proposal falls, and we therefore call an end to the meeting here. Thank you all very much.